It happened on a rainy Tuesday morning, in room 214 of Booker T. Washington High School. The kind of gray, moody morning where your socks get wet before homeroom and your breath fogs up the glass when you lean too close to the window. It was fourth period Algebra 2, and the classroom was half asleep, half annoyed. Jaden Carter, 15, sat 2 rows from the back. Hoodie up. Pencil tapping. Eyes locked on the whiteboard where the problem of the day was scrawled in red expo marker. If 3x plus 2 is equal to 14, and x is an integer, what is the value of x? Easy. Too easy. Jaden already knew the answer before the bell even rang. What caught his interest wasn't the answer, it was the why. The shape the equation made in his head. The symmetry. The idea that every math problem, no matter how dull, could tell a story if you looked close enough. So when Ms. Whitmore, stern and sharp as a ruler, asked for volunteers, Jaden's hand went up. Not because he wanted to impress anyone, he learned early that didn't go well when you looked like him, but because he had to. The answer in his head was demanding to be let out. "All right, Jaden," Ms. Whitmore said, arms crossed. "Walk us through it." Jaden stood slowly, his Timberlands scuffing the linoleum floor. He walked to the front, took the marker, and drew a simple line across the bottom of the board. "What's that?" Ms. Whitmore asked. "It's a number line," Jaden replied calmly. "I like visualizing the balance of the equation, not just solving for x. So I'm showing how the plus 2 shifts the line, and how subtracting 2 on both sides moves it back, then dividing both sides by 3 to find where the balance lands." He talked with quiet certainty, drawing arrows and explaining how equations were like seesaws, balance one side, and the other responds. Simple. Elegant. When he turned around, Ms. Whitmore was smirking. "A number line? For a 2-step linear equation? That's creative, Jaden," she said, sarcasm hanging heavy in the air. "Maybe next time you can draw a comic strip about it." The class erupted in laughter. Jaden froze. He wasn't used to speaking in front of the class. He hated the heat that rushed to his ears when people laughed, not with him, but at him. And the way Ms. Whitmore smirked, arms still folded, like his explanation wasn't just wrong, it was ridiculous. He started. "Well, you were just overcomplicating something very simple," she interrupted. "This is why we stick to method. The standard way. Let's have someone else show the correct process." Jaden walked back to his seat, slow and stiff, the laughter still echoing. Someone muttered, "Bro thinks he's Einstein," and a few chuckled again. He slumped into his chair. Folded his arms. Stared out the window where the rain was tapping at the glass like it wanted in. Jaden didn't say a word the rest of class. When the bell rang, he was the last to leave. Ms. Whitmore barely looked up from her desk. But what she didn't see, what no one saw, was that Jaden had quietly snapped a picture of the board before it was erased. He wanted to remember. Not the problem. The moment. Because sometimes, it wasn't the correct answer that mattered. It was the way you saw the problem. That night, Jaden sat in his bedroom, walls lined with sticky notes and scraps of graph paper, and stared at the equation again. He recreated it on a sheet of printer paper and began adding to it, coordinates, alternate paths, even a small sketch of a balance scale to represent the mental image he tried to share. His room was more lab than living space. An old bookshelf sagged under the weight of library math books and second-hand college textbooks he'd collected from yard sales. His laptop, old, slow, screen cracked, was open to a YouTube video about fractals. On his desk, taped to the wall, were words he'd copied from a documentary once. "The world doesn't need more people who follow instructions. It needs people who see differently." He whispered them aloud, like a prayer. Outside, Detroit breathed its usual nighttime rhythm, sirens, wind, the occasional dog barking. But inside, Jaden was somewhere else. Not in his room. Not even in his city. But deep in thought, deep in the numbers. What Ms. Whitmore didn't understand was that math wasn't just rules. It was language. It was imagination. It was the only place Jaden ever felt completely free. At school the next day, no one mentioned it. At least, not to his face. But he heard it in the hallway. The snickers. The side eyes. The way people said, "Mr. Genius," under their breath. He kept his head down. Ate lunch in the library. And when the librarian wasn't looking, he logged into a math forum he'd been following quietly for over a year. Anonymous. No face. No name. Just an account called Novamind42. That night, he posted the problem. "I solved this in class using a number line. Got laughed at. But I feel like there's something deeper here. Am I crazy for visualizing basic algebra like this?" Most replies were basic. "It's not wrong, just not necessary." Or, "Cool idea, but stick to the test format." But one reply stood out. "There's beauty in how you think. Keep building it out. Show me more." Bell curious. Jaden paused. The name didn't mean much yet. But those words. They were the first time someone didn't laugh. They were the first time someone saw him. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jaden Carter didn't sleep well that night. Not because of the laughter in class, though that haunted him in waves every time he closed his eyes. And not even because of the reply from Bell Curious on the math forum, though that stayed at the edge of his thoughts like a spark that refused to go out. He didn't sleep because the numbers kept talking. In his dreams, equations crawled across the ceiling. Graphs bled off the pages. Formulas spun in kaleidoscopic patterns behind his eyelids. They whispered things. Patterns. Problems. Possibilities. And Jaden, even asleep, listened. The alarm clock buzzed at 6:30 a.m. He smacked it off and rolled over, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. Outside, Detroit was slowly shaking off the night, the rumble of buses, the shout of someone a block away, the dull hum of life starting again. "Jay," a raspy voice called from the hallway. "You up, baby?" "Yeah, Grandma." "Come eat something. You can't think on an empty stomach." Jaden swung his legs off the bed and grabbed the nearest hoodie. It smelled faintly like chalk dust and peppermint gum, but he didn't care. He passed by the wall where his solution mural had started, a patchwork of taped-up pages, napkin doodles, and sticky notes filled with what his classmates called alien scribbles. To Jaden, it was home. In the kitchen, Grandma Louise was already at the stove. Tiny and wiry, with a head full of silver curls wrapped in a satin bonnet, she moved like someone used to waking up early and working hard. Her hands shook a little when she poured the grits into 2 chipped bowls. "Got a good one for you today," she said, handing him his bowl. "You know what the square root of 144 is?" "Grandma," Jaden said, cracking a rare smile. "You've asked me that like 100 times. I just want to make sure you ain't gone soft." Jaden took a bite and muttered through a mouthful, 12. "Don't talk with your mouth full, boy. It's still 12 today, but the day you get it wrong, we goin' to church." Noted. Louise sat across from him and stared at him with the kind of eyes that saw everything, even when she said nothing. "You okay?" Jaden hesitated. "Yeah. Just, school stuff." Louise didn't push. She never did. She just nodded, reached over, and gently squeezed his hand. "You ain't like the rest of M.J. That's your gift. And sometimes, folks hate what they don't understand." Jaden nodded, looking down at the table. He wanted to believe that. But believing in himself was harder than believing in math. Backstory unfolds. Jayden had lived with Grandma Louise since he was 7. His mother, Tasha, died from a sudden heart attack while working the night shift at the auto parts factory. His father? He left before Jayden could remember his face. There were no siblings. No cousins close by. Just him and Louise in a small 2-bedroom house on the east side, where the streetlights flickered and the neighbors knew each other's business. Grandma Louise used to be a high school science teacher, back when schools still had budgets and classrooms still had hope. She'd retired early after her diagnosis, congestive heart failure, but her mind was still sharp. Every evening, she'd sit beside Jayden while he did homework, correcting grammar, challenging his ideas, telling stories about the old days when black students weren't expected to go to college, let alone dream about places like MIT or Stanford. She called him Professor before anyone else did. And when he first showed signs of being a math whiz, at the age of 6, solving fractions before he learned to tie his shoes, she poured everything she had into nurturing that spark. They couldn't afford fancy tutors or test prep courses. But they had each other. And books. So many books. Jayden didn't grow up with video games. He grew up with Carl Sagan, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and dusty copies of Scientific American. His bedtime stories weren't fairy tales, they were word problems. But all that brilliance came at a price. At school, Jayden never quite fit. He was the weird kid, the one who muttered formulas to himself at lunch, who asked teachers questions they couldn't answer, who sometimes corrected the math textbook, and turned out to be right. It didn't help that he was tall, quiet, and black in a school where being smart made you a target and standing out made you vulnerable. Some teachers liked him. Others tolerated him. Ms. Whitmore, though. She always seemed irritated by him. Like his very existence tested her patience. She once told him, "You'd be great if you just followed the rules." He never knew if that was meant as praise or a warning. That afternoon, in the school library, Jayden logged back onto the math forum. Belle Curious had replied again. "The way you think isn't wrong, it's rare. Don't confuse laughter for truth. Keep sharing. Build it out." He stared at the words. Rare. Not wrong. For the first time, he clicked on the user's profile. No photo. No personal info. Just a line in the bio. Physics. Patterns. Possibility. Location, somewhere with gravity. Jayden smiled a little. It felt familiar. He typed back. "Thanks. I'll post another one tonight. I have more ideas I've been sitting on." That night, back in his room, Jayden spread out 3 notebooks and began writing. He was working on something bigger now, not just equations, but theories, ways of connecting algebra with spatial reasoning and logical heuristics that, to him, were as natural as breathing. He didn't care that Ms. Whitmore thought he was wrong. He didn't even care about the laughter anymore. Because someone out there, somewhere, was listening. And they didn't laugh. Back to Grandma Louise's room. Later that evening, Jayden peeked into his grandma's room. She was resting, a small oxygen machine humming beside her. She looked peaceful, almost like she was floating. He sat beside her and whispered, "Grandma, someone smart said I was rare. Can you believe that?" Eyes still closed, Louise smiled faintly. "I told you, baby. You're not weird. You're gifted. And someday, the world's gone, catch up." Jayden sat there a little longer, watching her breathe. He didn't know what the next day would bring. But for the first time in a long while, he couldn't wait to find out. On the surface, nothing changed. Jayden still walked the same cracked sidewalks to school every morning, backpack slung low, hoodie pulled high. He still sat in the same back row desk in Algebra 2, still kept his head down when Ms. Whitmore called roll, still avoided eye contact with anyone who smirked when she said his name. But inside, everything felt different. The laughter hadn't faded, it lingered, like a bruise just beneath the skin. But now, it wasn't the only voice in his head. Now there was another voice. A digital one. Quiet but steady. Encouraging. A voice that had called him, rare. And that one word carried more weight than all the mockery in the room. Still, surviving school wasn't about who thought you were smart. It was about not getting noticed by the wrong people. Jayden had a system. He never walked down the main hallway between third and fourth period. That's where Jarrell and his crew posted up by the vending machines. Jarrell was loud, quick with insults, and allergic to anything that smelled like effort. The kind of guy who'd roast you for carrying more than one book. Jayden also avoided the cafeteria. Too many eyes, too many chances to get called out for acting white, just because he spoke clearly and didn't joke about teachers' moms. Instead, he ate in the library. Cold ham sandwich. Bag of pretzels. Old calculator beside him, just in case he wanted to kill time solving quadratic equations for fun. Yeah. For fun. But no system is perfect. One afternoon, the library was closed for a faculty meeting. Jayden wandered outside, looking for a quiet spot, when he heard the footsteps behind him. Fast. Heavy. He turned just in time to see Jarrell and two others, Deontay and Ray, blocking the exit near the gym. "Ayo, Einstein," Jarrell called, arms spread like he was greeting an old friend. "Heard you trying to teach Ms. Whitmore how to do math now." Jayden didn't answer. He clutched his lunch and started to move past them. Jarrell stepped in his path. "You think you better than us, huh?" "No," Jayden said softly, trying to keep calm. "I don't think I'm better than anyone." "Oh, you better than us," Deontay added, smirking. "You be out here talking 'bout formulas and theories and like this a college campus." Jayden didn't look at them. He couldn't. The heat in his chest was building. That old familiar anxiety, like a timer ticking down. "I'm just trying to go to class." Jarrell stepped forward. "Say it again. Louder. Like you did with that number line." Jayden's jaw clenched. He could see the hallway behind them. Two teachers chatting in the distance, but too far to help. So he did what he always did when he felt cornered, he retreated inward. He pictured a graph. A coordinate plane. He imagined his current position as the origin, 0, 0. Jarrell was a variable pushing toward a negative x value. Jayden needed to find the quickest slope out. In real time, it looked like him ducking sideways, slipping past Deontay, and sprinting down the hall. He heard laughter behind him, and someone shouted, "Yo, he really think he in a movie." But he didn't stop running until he reached the math wing. In the boys' bathroom, Jayden splashed cold water on his face. He stared at himself in the mirror. The hoodie, the tired eyes, the forced calm. He looked nothing like the genius they teased him for being. But also nothing like the kid who was supposed to survive a place like this. And the thing was, he wasn't trying to stand out. He just couldn't help seeing the world differently. That wasn't arrogance. That was instinct. That night, he didn't say anything to Grandma Louise. No reason to worry her. She had enough on her plate with her meds, her checkups, her weekly visits from the nurse who always gave Jayden side eyes when he asked about dosages and side effects. But he did write about it in his notebook. Not the part with Jarrell. Not the running. The numbers part. The way fear could be measured. Quantified. Modeled. He created a formula. F equals R, C. Fear equals reaction minus control. The less control you feel, the more fear fills the gap. It wasn't scientific. Not yet. But it helped. Numbers always helped. Later, on the math forum, he posted a new thread. Fear has a pattern. I think we can model it. Emotion as equation. Not exact, but approximate. Is that crazy? A reply came within the hour. Bell curious, not crazy. Brilliant. Emotion is math, in disguise. You're seeing something most people never dare to quantify. Explore it. Jaden stared at the screen. He didn't know who this Bell curious really was. But he was starting to feel like, whoever they were, they saw him more clearly than anyone in real life. A few days later, something changed. Jaden stayed after class to finish a quiz, and when he turned it in, Ms. Whitmore glanced at his answers. Her expression froze. You solved this, differently again. Jaden braced himself. She didn't laugh. But she didn't praise him either. She just sighed and said, you know, standardized tests don't care how you see the problem. Only that you answer it their way. Jaden nodded. But what he wanted to say was, then maybe the tests are broken. Back home, Louise was sitting in her recliner, wrapped in a shawl, eyes closed, but not asleep. You ever get tired of pretending it don't hurt? She asked softly. Jaden stopped in the hallway. She didn't open her eyes, just said, I heard the silence when you came in. And I know that kind of silence. Jaden walked over and knelt beside her. Sometimes I wish I was just normal. Louise's eyes opened, full of something ancient and fierce. Boy, don't you ever wish to be small enough to fit in a box the world made for you? You were born outside of it. Jaden exhaled. Long, slow. She took his hand. There's bruises people see. And then there's the ones they don't. But both need healing. And you got a mind that can heal others one day, if you don't let them break it first. That night, Jaden did something he hadn't done before. He sent Bell Curious a direct message. Hey. You've been helping me more than you know. Can I ask, who are you? The reply didn't come right away. But when it did, it only said one word. Soon. Jaden stared at it for a long time. Something was coming. Something was changing. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid of being different. He was afraid of what might happen if he kept hiding it. On Monday morning, something small happened. So small, it could have been nothing. But that's the thing about storms, they often start with silence. Ms. Whitmore's class was unusually quiet as she passed out a fresh worksheet titled Polynomial Word Problems, Challenge Set. Jaden flipped the sheet over and skimmed the first problem. A ball is thrown into the air. Its height, h, in feet after t seconds is given by the equation. H, t, equals dash 16t superscript 2 plus 32t plus 48. At what time will the ball hit the ground? He smiled. Easy enough. But then, he paused. There was a better way to see this. A deeper way. While the rest of the class plugged in numbers to the quadratic formula, Jaden began sketching a graph on the back of the page. He wasn't just solving for the zero, he was telling the story the equation wanted to reveal. Gravity. Motion. Time. All in one curve. When he finished, his paper had more ink than most test booklets. Arrows, notes, a parabolic arch showing the rise and fall of the ball, the precise moment it touched the x-axis again. He even calculated the vertex, maximum height, midpoint of motion. Jaden was proud of it. He turned it in with a quiet, thank you. Ms. Whitmore barely glanced at him. The next day, it was taped to the whiteboard. Jaden's paper. But not as praise. It had a red circle drawn around one sentence at the top in Sharpie. What if 0 wasn't just the answer, but the moment everything changes? Next to it, Ms. Whitmore had scribbled a note in block letters. This is a math class, not a philosophy seminar. The class laughed. Again. Jaden's throat tightened. His body felt cold. Like he was standing in front of the room, naked in front of the world. He didn't say a word. just sank into his chair. That afternoon, he didn't go to the library. He walked home the long way. Past the construction yard. Past the chain-link fence covered in torn posters. Past the mural of Malcolm X faded under sun and rain, his eyes still watching, still daring you to rise. Jayden walked until his legs burned. Until the noise in his head got quiet. Until the hurt turned into something else. Something sharper. That night, he didn't message, Bell curious. He opened his notebook and wrote one word at the top of the page. 0. Then, underneath it. Everyone thinks 0 means nothing. But really, it's the most important number of all. It's the point between what was and what will be. It's not the absence. It's the origin. He sketched again. Not a ball this time, but a graph that looked like a heartbeat. Flat, then a spike, then flat again. Life. Math wasn't just formulas. It was feeling. And Jayden couldn't stop seeing it. When he finally logged on to the math forum, his latest thread, titled, What 0 Actually Means, had gone semi-viral. Dozens of replies. One, in particular, stood out. Bell curious. 0 is where transformation begins. Don't let people laugh at what they can't yet comprehend. You're not solving equations. You're mapping human experience. Keep going. Then, another line. P.S. You're about to be noticed. Be ready. Jayden blinked. Noticed? By who? Why? 2 days later, the school counselor called him down during third period. He sat in the cramped office under the flickering fluorescent light, his knees bouncing. Mr. Hernandez, the counselor, had kind eyes but tired ones. He slid a laptop across the table. I got an email from someone named Dr. Olivia Bell. Says she saw one of your math threads online. Jayden's heart skipped. Dr. Bell? Yeah. Apparently, she's a big deal. Jayden slowly clicked open the email. To whom it may concern. I recently came across a student's math solution that was posted on a STEM forum. The username was Novamind42. The way this student visualizes mathematics is rare. I've spent my career researching mathematical cognition and creativity. This young person has the kind of insight we see maybe once in a decade. I'd like to get in touch with him, mentor him, if he's open. Dr. Olivia Bell. Senior Research Fellow, MIT Media Lab. Jayden stared at the screen. Then stared at Mr. Hernandez. You okay? The counselor asked. Jayden nodded slowly. Then faster. I think so, he whispered. I didn't think people like her existed outside YouTube. He didn't tell Ms. Whitmore. He didn't tell Jarell. He told Grandma Louise, though. That night, over chicken and rice, he pulled out his phone and read the email aloud. She sat still for a long moment, then whispered, well, would you look at that? Then louder, they finally catching on. Jayden messaged, Bell curious. I read your email. You're Dr. Bell, aren't you? The reply came instantly. Guilty. Wanted you to trust the math before you saw the name. Then. You've got something special, Jayden. The kind of mind that can change how people think. But the world's not always ready for minds like yours. That's why I'm here. Jayden swallowed the lump in his throat. For the first time, he didn't feel crazy for thinking the way he did. He felt seen. At school, Ms. Whitmore never mentioned the email. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe she wouldn't have cared. But Jayden started walking a little taller. He didn't shrink when he answered a question. He started asking harder ones. And when Jarell tried to block his path again a few days later, Jayden didn't run. He just looked him in the eye and said, the square root of ignorance is fear. Jarell blinked. What? Jayden smiled. Exactly. Then walked right past him. That week, Jayden got a package in the mail. It was a book. The Mathematics of Human Meaning, by Dr. Olivia Bell. Inside the cover, in neat, careful handwriting. To Jayden Carter. Some minds were never meant to fit inside the box. So build your own space. Olivia. Jayden closed the book and held it to his chest. 0 wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The envelope was thin. Too thin to mean anything, Jayden thought. He turned it over twice before tearing it open. It didn't feel like a college letter. No fancy seal. No thick welcome packet. Just a folded piece of stationery and his name printed neatly at the top. But when he opened it, everything stopped. Jayden Carter. We've reviewed your recent mathematical analysis and independent work. Your insights have reached members of the MIT Media Lab and the Advanced Theoretical Mathematics Department. We would like to formally invite you to a summer research mentorship program, led by Dr. Olivia Bell. All travel, housing, and educational expenses will be covered. We believe in minds that challenge the system. You belong in spaces where your ideas are not only accepted, but celebrated. Welcome to the beginning. The Office of Special Programs, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Jayden just stared at the paper. His fingers trembled. His breathing slowed until it wasn't breathing at all, just holding. Jay. What's that? Grandma Louise called from the next room. He walked to the doorway, still stunned. She looked up from her chair, glasses halfway down her nose. You look like you seen a ghost. He held out the letter. She read it once. Then again. And for a full minute, she didn't say a word. Finally, she looked up. Eyes glistening. Voice thick. Well, I'll be damned. Word spread fast. Faster than Jayden expected. A teacher mentioned it in the lounge. A guidance counselor made a quiet phone call. A student overheard. By Wednesday, the entire school knew. By Friday, so did the internet. Someone had found Jayden's forum thread, the one with the zero theory, and screenshotted his name. Posted it on TikTok with a dramatic voiceover and sad piano music. He solved a math problem differently. His teacher laughed. But MIT called him a genius. It exploded. By Sunday, it had 2.3 million views. People started messaging him online. Some were kind. Supportive. Inspired. Others, not so much. This kid thinks he's smarter than his teacher. Guarantee this is just another affirmative action pick. Let me see him do real math, not poetry with numbers. The praise and hate came in waves. Jayden couldn't log into his inbox without dozens of new messages waiting. It was overwhelming. Paralyzing. And worst of all, at school, things got complicated. Monday morning, the principal pulled Jayden into his office. Jayden, son, we're proud of what you've accomplished, he began, his voice overly rehearsed. We'd just appreciate if you kept the media attention, outside the school walls. I didn't post anything, Jayden said quietly. I know. But this kind of attention, press, university eyes, it can be disruptive. Other students might feel overshadowed. Jayden nodded slowly. He understood what the principal meant, even if he didn't say it. Stay small. Don't rock the boat. Later that day, in math class, Ms. Whitmore was quiet. Unusually quiet. She passed out a test and didn't say a word. But when Jayden turned his in, she looked at him. Not with pride. Not with curiosity. With something colder. Congratulations on MIT, she said. Flat. Distant. Thank you, Jayden said. She glanced at his paper. Let's hope they value creativity over correctness. Jayden blinked. Excuse me. Ms. Whitmore leaned in slightly, keeping her voice low. I don't know what tricks you pulled, Jayden. But just remember, mathematics isn't about popularity. It's about seeing what others can't, he replied quietly. She didn't respond. But she didn't need to. At lunch, Jayden sat alone outside. The noise of the cafeteria too loud. The whispers too sharp. He scrolled through the latest article someone sent him, Detroit teens' radical math theory gains MIT attention. They called it radical. They called it unorthodox. They called it controversial. He didn't want to be any of those things. He just wanted to be right. That evening, Jayden sat with Grandma Louise on the porch. The sun dipped behind the rooftops, casting a golden haze over their street. You think I did something wrong? He asked. Louise sipped her tea. You did something different. And different always makes people uncomfortable. I didn't ask for the attention. She looked at him over the rim of her mug. That don't matter. Greatness don't wait for permission. Jayden sat back. Feels like everyone either loves me or wants to watch me fall. Louise chuckled softly. That means you're doing something worth noticing. Later that night, a new message popped up in Jayden's inbox. It was from Dr. Olivia Bell. The noise is loud because the world fears new patterns. Keep solving. Don't shrink for their comfort. This is just the beginning. O.B. Jayden leaned back in his chair. He thought about the teacher who laughed. The students who mocked. The school that asked him to stay quiet. And the scientist who believed. He grabbed a pen and wrote on the first page of a brand new notebook. Chapter 1. What the world calls mistakes, are just solutions waiting for context. The storm had started. But Jayden was learning to dance in the rain. It was 7:30 p.m. on a Thursday when Jayden got the call. His phone buzzed, the number marked as MIT Media Lab flashing across the screen. He froze, staring at it for a moment too long before answering. His heartbeat quickened, the sound in his ears almost deafening. Hello. A calm voice greeted him. Jayden. This is Sarah Mitchell from MIT. I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. Jayden's palms were suddenly sweaty. He wiped them on his jeans. No, not at all. Great, she said, her tone warm but businesslike. We've seen the response to your work, and we're incredibly impressed. Dr. Bell and the department would love to feature you in an exclusive interview for our upcoming event. We believe your story could inspire thousands of students, just like you, to push boundaries. Jayden's mind raced. An interview? With MIT? A chance to talk to the world about math? About zero? Sure, I'd love to, he stammered. Fantastic. We'd like to arrange a Zoom call. We'll send over the details, but we'd like to get this scheduled as soon as possible. How does tomorrow afternoon sound? Tomorrow? Yeah, that works, Jayden said, trying to keep his voice steady, even as his insides felt like they were turning to jelly. The next afternoon, Jayden was sitting at his desk, staring at the screen, trying to ignore the nerves twisting in his stomach. He had spent the entire morning rehearsing his answers. What should he say? Should he make it personal? Should he talk about his math journey? About what zero meant to him? The clock ticked closer to 3 p.m., and suddenly, a Zoom notification popped up. MIT Media Lab flashed on the screen. Jayden took a deep breath and clicked the link. The screen loaded, and there, in the box, was Dr. Olivia Bell herself, her familiar smile spreading across her face as soon as she saw him. Jayden. It's so great to finally meet you, Dr. Bell said, her voice as warm as ever. How are you? I'm good, nervous, Jayden admitted with a nervous chuckle. Dr. Bell nodded knowingly. That's completely understandable. This is a big moment for you. But I want you to remember, this isn't about impressing anyone. It's about sharing your story. Jaden nodded, his heartbeat still thundering in his chest. But her calming presence helped him take the edge off. She continued, we've received a lot of attention for your work, especially your theory on zero. You've started a conversation that's gone beyond just numbers. It's about the way we think. The way we see the world. He smiled, feeling a small flicker of pride. She leaned forward slightly, the screen lighting up her face. Let's dive right in. How did you first arrive at the idea that zero wasn't just a placeholder, but a powerful concept, one that could change how we see math, even how we see life itself? Jaden thought for a moment, feeling the weight of the question. But he didn't hesitate. This was his chance to explain, to tell the world what he had seen all along. It started with a math problem, he said, his voice growing more confident. I was solving this equation for my class, and everyone was just plugging in numbers, but I saw something more. I saw the space between the numbers. Zero wasn't just the answer. It was the starting point. The place where things shifted. Where things changed. Dr. Bell smiled. It's clear you've grasped a deep truth, Jaden. Zero isn't a point of nothingness. It's the boundary between what's known and what's possible. It's a threshold. A transition. Jaden nodded. He hadn't thought of it like that, but now that Dr. Bell had said it, it clicked. That was exactly it. She continued, your perspective challenges traditional ideas of math. You're not just solving problems, you're creating new ways to think about them. How do you think this understanding of zero can influence other fields? Other disciplines beyond math? Jaden hesitated for a second. It felt like the conversation was moving faster than he could keep up. But he pressed on, the words flowing more easily now. It's like when people think their life is stuck, right? They're at a dead end. A zero. But that's not the end. That's where they can make a change. Every time something feels impossible, it's really just a threshold, a moment before everything shifts. I think we all need to learn how to see that. How to push past the zero to the next thing. Dr. Bell sat back in her chair, clearly impressed. That's exactly what we need, Jaden. Young minds that see beyond the obvious. Who understand that math isn't just about numbers, it's about how we approach problems in life. The interview lasted for almost an hour. Dr. Bell asked more questions, about his influences, his aspirations, the way his mind worked. Jaden answered every one with growing confidence. He wasn't just a kid from Detroit anymore. He was a thinker, a creator, a force to be reckoned with. When the interview wrapped up, Dr. Bell looked directly into the camera. Jaden, you've got something incredible here. I can't wait to see where you go. Keep pushing the boundaries. Jaden nodded, his eyes glistening. Thank you. Thank you so much. They exchanged a few more words, and then the call ended. Jaden sat there for a long time, staring at the empty screen. He had just spoken to one of the most brilliant minds in the world, someone who had helped shape the future of technology and mathematics. And she had listened to him. She believed in him. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Grandma Louise. You did it, baby. Proud of you. You keep proving that what they say about you doesn't define who you are. He smiled and typed back. I'm just getting started. But the interview wasn't the only thing that changed that day. The next morning, Jaden walked into school and felt the difference immediately. As he entered the hallway, he could feel the eyes on him. It was no longer whispers of mockery. No, the energy had shifted. Students were watching him, waiting for him to say something. Teachers glanced over, some with small smiles, some with nervous glances. It wasn't just the interview. It was the article that had been published that morning in the local newspaper. Teens' radical approach to math gains attention of MIT, sparks worldwide conversation. The title alone was enough to make him feel like his world had just turned upside down. But it wasn't just about the attention. It was about what he had unlocked. As Jayden walked toward his math class, he saw Ms. Whitmore at her desk, reviewing papers. He stood at the door for a moment, his hand on the knob. Then he opened it and walked in. She looked up at him. "Morning, Ms. Whitmore," he said. Her eyes flickered. "Morning, Jayden." He sat at his desk, feeling the weight of the room on him. This time, though, it didn't feel as heavy. The teacher who had laughed. The students who doubted him. Jayden was no longer just a kid who solved problems. He was someone who had seen beyond the numbers. And now, the world was finally starting to see it too. Jayden had always dreamed of a future where his mind could roam free, where his ideas could shake the world, just like the great mathematicians and scientists he had studied. But now that he was in the midst of it all, it was starting to feel less like a dream and more like something he wasn't ready for. Something bigger than he could ever have imagined. It was another typical Wednesday, or so Jayden thought. After school, he sat in the quiet corner of the library, flipping through a math textbook for inspiration. He wasn't preparing for a test. He wasn't solving problems for class. He was just thinking. His mind had become a whirlwind of ideas, equations, and theories. That's when the phone rang. The number on the screen was unrecognized, but the area code made him pause. 617. MIT. He stared at it for a moment, heart suddenly pounding in his chest. Was this it? Was this the moment he'd been waiting for? Jayden's hand shook as he swiped the screen to answer. "Hello. Is this Jayden Carter?" The voice on the other end was smooth, calm, but the underlying excitement was palpable. "This is he," Jayden said, trying to keep his voice steady, though he could feel a lump forming in his throat. "This is Dr. David Harper," the voice continued. "I'm calling from MIT's Advanced Theoretical Mathematics Department. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Jayden couldn't believe what he was hearing. Dr. David Harper. The same Dr. Harper who had been a lead researcher on projects involving quantum physics and mathematical modeling. The same one who had won multiple awards for his work on the intersection of mathematics and technology. No. This is a great time," Jayden replied, trying to keep his voice from trembling. "I wanted to reach out because of your work on the zero theory," Dr. Harper continued. "We've been reviewing your interview, and I must say, I've never seen a student think about mathematics in such a unique and, frankly, revolutionary way." Jayden's breath caught in his throat. "Thank you, sir. I never thought it would get this much attention." "Well, that's the thing," Dr. Harper said. "When we see brilliance, we recognize it. We see possibility. And I believe your theory has the potential to break through some long-standing barriers in mathematical understanding." Jayden's mind was reeling. Barriers? Possibility? What was Dr. Harper even talking about? "Are you familiar with the current work being done in quantum mechanics?" Dr. Harper asked. Jayden blinked. "A little. I've read a few papers here and there. I know the basics. The math behind particle behavior, superposition, entanglement." Dr. Harper chuckled softly. "You know more than most of our graduate students, Jayden. And that's why I'm calling. We'd like to bring you on board for a summer research project here at MIT. You'll work alongside our team of researchers, helping to apply your theory in ways that could challenge some of the most fundamental principles of quantum theory." Jayden felt like the room was spinning. His mind couldn't process what he was hearing. MIT? A research project? With Dr. Harper himself? The kind of work he had only dreamed about was suddenly being offered to him. But there was something more, something that made him hesitate. I don't know what to say. This is amazing. But I'm just a high school student. I haven't even graduated yet." "We know, Jayden. We believe your potential is bigger than any academic timeline. You have the raw talent to make a real impact, and we want to give you the platform to do that. This project would be an incredible opportunity to explore not only your theory, but also the intersections between mathematics and cutting-edge scientific technology. Jayden swallowed hard, trying to collect his thoughts. The offer was too big. Too overwhelming. A part of him wanted to say yes immediately. Another part of him was terrified of stepping into the unknown. Would he be able to handle it? Was he really ready for this? There was a long pause on the line, and then Dr. Harper spoke again. Jayden, I don't want to pressure you. Take your time to think about it. But know this, we don't extend offers like this lightly. We believe in you. And we believe in the work you're doing. We're just waiting for you to say yes. Jayden ended the call with his head spinning. He didn't know how long he had sat there after the phone hung up, staring blankly at the table in front of him. The world around him felt distant, unreal. MIT. Dr. Harper. The research team. He had imagined opportunities like this in his wildest dreams, but now that it was real, he didn't know if he could live up to it. That night, he sat on the porch with Grandma Louise, the night air cool against his skin. Got the call, huh? She asked, her eyes glinting with knowing. Jayden nodded, his hands fidgeting with the edge of his shirt. Yeah. They want me to join a research project at MIT. They say I have the potential to change how we understand math. But I don't know. It's so big. What if I fail? Louise's gaze softened. She set her tea down and placed a hand on his. Jayden, baby, you've already done things most people never even dream of. You've already changed minds. You've already proved you can think in ways others don't. This is just the next step. And I know you're scared. But it's okay to be scared. What matters is you don't let that fear stop you. Jayden looked out at the darkening sky, feeling both small and infinite at the same time. There was a truth to her words that he couldn't deny. He had always been afraid of failure. But it was that very fear that had pushed him to work harder, think deeper, and question everything. I'm scared, Jayden admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. And that's okay, Louise said. But never forget, the greatest minds were once scared kids who didn't know what they were getting into. You'll be just fine. And no matter what happens, you'll always have us cheering you on. Jayden nodded slowly. He had made it this far, despite the odds, despite the doubts, despite everything. And now, with an opportunity like this in front of him, he knew what he had to do. The next day, Jayden called Dr. Harper back. I'll do it, he said, his voice steady and confident. Dr. Harper's voice crackled with excitement. You won't regret this, Jayden. We'll send over the details soon. Welcome to the team. Jayden hung up, his heart racing with anticipation. This was his moment. The moment he had dreamed of. And now, it was happening. But as he stood by the window, looking out at the world that had just shifted beneath his feet, Jayden couldn't help but wonder. What would the world think now? What would his old teachers think? And more importantly, what would Ms. Whitmore think? It was the first Monday of summer break when Jayden stepped foot into MIT's campus. The morning sun was shining brightly, the campus sprawling out in front of him, filled with the hum of students walking, talking, and making their way to various buildings. But none of it felt real to Jayden. His feet barely touched the ground as he walked, the magnitude of the situation weighing heavily on him. He had been preparing for weeks now, getting every detail in place. The summer research project had been an intense blur of emails, calls, and virtual meetings, but now, standing here, in the heart of MIT, the reality of it all hit him. Jayden adjusted his backpack, the one he had carried since middle school, now worn and frayed. It was like an anchor, something familiar in a sea of new faces and unfamiliar places. Jayden. Over here, a voice called out. He turned around to see Dr. Harper, standing at the entrance of a building with a welcoming smile. The sight of him was comforting, even though Jayden felt more nervous than he had ever been in his life. "Hey, Dr. Harper," Jayden greeted, forcing a smile. "You made it," Dr. Harper said with an infectious enthusiasm. "Let me give you a quick tour before we get started." Jayden nodded, trying to keep his composure, but inside, he was nervous. Everything felt so big. So overwhelming. The tour was brief, but it did little to ease the anxiety building up inside Jayden. As they walked past large, shiny glass buildings, sleek lecture halls, and cutting-edge labs, Jayden's mind wandered to the moment when he'd first been offered this opportunity. He had been excited then, almost too excited to feel the weight of what he was getting into. But now that he was here, standing among some of the greatest scientific minds in the world, the reality felt daunting. "This is it, Jayden," Dr. Harper said as they stepped into one of the most advanced research labs Jayden had ever seen. There were whiteboards covered in complex equations, computers displaying mathematical models, and workstations with scientists and students hunched over, deep in thought. "This is where the real work happens. You'll be working closely with a team of researchers here on the project we discussed. But we're counting on you. Your zero theory could change everything, and we're relying on your brilliance to guide us." Jayden's heart raced at the thought. He'd never felt more like an outsider in his life. The other students in the lab were all much older, all far more experienced. Some had years of undergraduate studies behind them, others were PhD candidates with advanced knowledge that seemed light years ahead of his own. I'm ready," Jayden said, his voice betraying the uncertainty he was feeling. "I know you are," Dr. Harper said, clapping him on the shoulder. "But remember, this isn't just about theory. It's about applying your ideas to real-world problems. It's about pushing boundaries. No pressure, right?" Jayden tried to laugh, but it felt forced. No pressure. Right. The next few weeks passed in a blur of equations, long hours, and meetings with researchers. Jayden quickly learned that the reality of academic research was nothing like the quiet moments he spent solving equations in his room back home. Here, in the MIT lab, the stakes were higher. The work was more demanding. And the pressure was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Every time he contributed an idea or a solution, there were critical eyes on him. He felt like an imposter, like someone who didn't belong in such an elite space. The other researchers would nod politely when he shared his theories, but Jayden could see the skepticism in their eyes. They were all waiting for him to slip up, to prove that he was just a high school kid who had no business being here. Then came the first big test. Dr. Harper had arranged for Jayden to present his findings to the entire team. The day was set, and the pressure was mounting. Jayden spent every waking moment leading up to the presentation reviewing his notes, refining his theories, and double-checking every calculation. He had to get this right. On the day of the presentation, Jayden found himself pacing outside the conference room. His hands were clammy, his stomach a tight knot of nerves. The room was filled with some of the brightest minds in science, all waiting to hear what the young prodigy had come up with. Dr. Harper came up to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Remember, Jayden, this is your moment. Don't worry about the pressure. Just share what you know. The rest will follow." But as Jayden walked into the room and saw the sea of faces staring back at him, the words suddenly didn't come. His throat felt dry, his mind a blur. "Go ahead, Jayden," Dr. Harper encouraged, sitting down at the front of the room. "We're all ears." Jayden cleared his throat and clicked to the first slide of his presentation. He started talking about his theory on zero, about how it wasn't just a placeholder in math, it was the starting point of change, of possibility. His words came out in a rush, his voice trembling slightly, but he pushed through. Halfway through, though, his confidence wavered. He could feel the eyes of the room on him, their skeptical gazes weighing him down. His mind raced, thinking of all the ways he could mess this up. What if he said something wrong? What if they laughed at him again? Then, he made a mistake. A simple error in one of his equations, one that had seemed right at first but now, as he stared at it on the screen, seemed glaringly wrong. He froze. His mind went blank. The silence in the room was deafening. For a moment, Jayden thought he could hear his heart beating in his ears. Dr. Harper raised an eyebrow, and the others were watching him closely, waiting for him to fix it, to explain himself. For what felt like an eternity, Jayden stood there, staring at the error. The pressure was too much. He had let it all build up inside, and now, in front of these brilliant minds, he had failed. But then, something unexpected happened. Dr. Harper stood up slowly, his calm voice cutting through the tension. "Jayden, I know this is tough. But it's okay. Everyone makes mistakes, especially when they're pushing the limits. We learn from this. This is just part of the process. And from where I'm standing, you've done something amazing here." Jayden looked up, blinking in disbelief. Dr. Harper was smiling, a small but reassuring smile. "Don't worry about the error. We'll fix it. But your theory, your idea, it's sound. You've got something big here, Jayden. Something no one has thought of before." Jayden stood there for a moment, trying to process his mentor's words. He wasn't sure if he believed it yet, but the weight of the pressure had been lifted, just a little bit. Later that evening, Jayden sat alone in his dorm room, reflecting on the day. He had messed up. But he had also learned something important: failure didn't mean the end. It meant growth. It meant finding a way to move forward, even when things didn't go as planned. Jayden realized that the pressure would always be there. It would never go away. But that was okay. As long as he kept pushing, kept learning, and kept believing in himself, he could face anything. Jayden couldn't shake the feeling that his mistake during the presentation at MIT was somehow bigger than just an error in his equation. It was a signal, a reminder of the immense pressure he had placed on himself. But as days went on, he started to see the error differently, not as a failure, but as part of the process. He began to dive deeper into his theory, working late into the night, tweaking and refining. Dr. Harper's encouragement was still fresh in his mind. "We learn from this. We'll fix it. But your theory, your idea, it's sound. You've got something big here." But while Dr. Harper's words helped ease the tension in the room, Jayden couldn't help but feel the pressure grow heavier with every passing day. He was no longer just a high school student with a unique idea. He was now a part of something bigger, a research project at MIT with experts in the field, a group of people who had already achieved more than he could ever imagine. And yet, here he was, feeling like he was still trying to prove himself. The following week, Jayden was sitting in the lab with Dr. Harper, working through a new series of complex equations. The problem they were tackling was a crucial one that could confirm or disprove his entire theory about zero. Jayden had learned something important in the past few days: the mathematical community wasn't just waiting for him to be right. They were waiting for him to be groundbreaking. It wasn't enough to just be correct, he had to break new ground, change the way the world thought about math. The pressure was suffocating. As the days passed, Jayden grew more and more absorbed in his work, shutting out everything else. He spent hours, sometimes until the early morning, scribbling formulas, testing his equations, and tweaking his theories. His world had become a blur of numbers and symbols, with only the hum of the computers and the scribble of chalk on the whiteboard as company. One evening, Jayden was alone in the lab when it happened. He had been running simulations based on his latest equations when, suddenly, the data came through differently. The results were unexpected, but not in the way he feared. His hypothesis seemed to be holding up. In fact, it was working, better than he had anticipated. The zero theory was beginning to make sense in ways that no one had expected. The answers to his simulations matched perfectly with predictions that had seemed out of reach. Jayden stood up from his chair, his heart racing. This could be it. This could be the breakthrough he had been working toward. His mind raced with possibilities. The zero theory, his theory, could change everything. It could be the key to understanding quantum mechanics in ways that no one had considered before. He had to share this with Dr. Harper, with the team. They had to see this. But as Jayden stared at the screen, a gnawing fear began to settle in his stomach. What if he was wrong? What if this was just another fluke, another false hope that would lead to disappointment? Taking a deep breath, Jayden reached for his phone and dialed Dr. Harper's number. The call rang, and Jayden's fingers drummed nervously on the desk as he waited. "Dr. Harper," he said, when the phone finally connected, "I think I've found something. The data, it's working. The theory, it's holding up." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Dr. Harper's voice came through, steady and encouraging. "Jayden, that's great news. I'm on my way. Don't touch anything. We need to look at this together." Jayden could barely contain his excitement. This was it. He could feel it. He had just taken a monumental step forward. When Dr. Harper arrived, Jayden was ready. They both sat in front of the computer, looking at the results. Dr. Harper ran the simulation again, his fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. The data was the same, confirming Jayden's hypothesis. "You're onto something, Jayden," Dr. Harper said, looking up from the screen. His face was serious, but there was a gleam of excitement in his eyes. "This is groundbreaking." Jayden let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It was a mixture of relief and disbelief. "But, what if it's wrong? What if there's something I missed?" Dr. Harper smiled, his voice calm. "You're overthinking it. This isn't about being perfect. It's about the process. You've done the hard work, Jayden. This is the culmination of everything you've put into it. We'll test it further, but this is the beginning of something big." For the first time in a long while, Jayden felt like he had done something right. He felt the weight of his self-doubt start to lift, piece by piece. He wasn't just a high school student anymore. He was part of a team, a group of people who believed in him and in his work. The next few days were a blur of excitement and anticipation. The team at MIT worked tirelessly to verify Jayden's results, and as each test confirmed the validity of his theory, Jayden's confidence grew. He had done it. His zero theory was real, and it was shaping the future of mathematics. But with success came a new set of pressures. Jayden now had to present his findings to the academic community, to the world. And there was one thing he knew for sure: his journey was far from over. As the research papers began to be written and the results prepared for publication, Jayden couldn't help but think back to that moment in Ms. Whitmore's classroom. When she had laughed at his theory, when she had dismissed him as just another dreamer. He had proven her wrong. But now, he had to face a new challenge, proving himself all over again. His next test wasn't just about math. It was about what it meant to belong in a world where only the best made their mark. Jayden wasn't sure if he was ready for what was to come, but he knew one thing for certain: there was no going back. He had come too far. The weeks after Jayden's breakthrough felt like a whirlwind. The news spread faster than he could have ever imagined. Papers were being published, news outlets were reporting on his discoveries, and even the academic world was beginning to take notice. Jayden was no longer the shy kid who sat in the back of the class, dismissed by his teacher. Now, he was a name being spoken about in the same breath as some of the greatest minds in mathematics. But with all the attention came a pressure unlike anything he had ever faced. He was being pulled in every direction. Invitations to conferences, interviews with reporters, phone calls from renowned researchers, it was a lot to handle. He felt like he was constantly under a microscope, and every word, every action, was being analyzed and scrutinized. It was the night before the big presentation at the International Conference on Mathematical Theory, and Jayden could barely sleep. He had spent the last few weeks refining his research, making sure everything was perfect for the biggest moment of his career so far. His phone buzzed next to him, and he picked it up, seeing a text from Dr. Harper. "Big day tomorrow, Jayden. Remember, you've earned this. Don't let the spotlight overwhelm you. You're not alone in this. I'll be there. Jaden smiled at the message, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety in his stomach. He had made it this far, but now that he was on the brink of presenting his theory to the world, he couldn't help but wonder if it was all too much. What if the world didn't believe him? What if he made a mistake? What if everyone laughed, just like Ms. Whitmore had all those months ago? He couldn't afford to think like that. He couldn't afford to doubt himself now. The next morning, Jaden found himself standing backstage, watching the crowds filing into the auditorium. The conference was being held at one of the largest venues he had ever seen, and the sheer number of people made his palms sweat. Scientists, professors, and mathematicians from all over the world had come to hear about the young prodigy and his groundbreaking theory on zero. Dr. Harper was by his side, giving him one final pep talk before he took the stage. "You've got this," Dr. Harper said, placing a reassuring hand on Jaden's shoulder. "Just remember, this is about your work, not about the people watching you. You've done the hardest part already. Now it's just about sharing what you know." Jaden nodded, trying to keep his nerves at bay. He had been preparing for this moment his entire life, and yet standing here, in front of the world's most brilliant minds, it felt like he was about to step into the unknown. He took a deep breath, adjusting his tie and glancing at his notes one last time. Then, the door to the stage opened, and Jaden was called to the podium. As he walked out onto the stage, the lights hit him, blinding him momentarily. The auditorium was massive, a sea of faces looking at him with expectation. He swallowed hard, his nerves threatening to overwhelm him, but then he remembered Dr. Harper's words. "This is about your work. Not about them. You've got this." Jaden steadied his breath and approached the microphone, adjusting the papers in front of him. His voice, though shaky at first, grew steadier as he began to speak. "Good morning, everyone," Jaden said, his voice carrying through the auditorium. "My name is Jaden Williams, and today, I'll be presenting my theory on zero, how it is not just a placeholder in mathematics, but the fundamental building block of our understanding of the universe." He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. The audience was silent, their attention fully on him. Jaden clicked to the first slide of his presentation. The screen behind him displayed a series of complex equations, each one more intricate than the last. He began to walk through the math, explaining his thought process, step by step. He could feel the eyes of the crowd on him, some skeptical, others intrigued. But as he spoke, Jaden found his rhythm. The more he explained, the more confident he became. "I know this may sound impossible," Jaden continued, "but what if zero isn't just a number? What if it represents something deeper, something that connects every aspect of our universe? Through my research, I believe I've found a way to prove that zero is the key to unlocking a new understanding of quantum mechanics." As he spoke, Jaden noticed a few nods from the crowd. Some of the older mathematicians in the room looked impressed, scribbling notes as they listened. Others seemed skeptical, raising their eyebrows at certain points. But Jaden pushed on, determined to finish what he had started. Then came the moment of truth, the core of his presentation. Jaden had saved the most critical part of his theory for the end. He clicked to the final slide, where a complex equation flashed on the screen. "This equation," he said, pointing to the screen, "represents the point of convergence, the place where zero is not just a concept in mathematics, but a catalyst for understanding the fabric of reality itself. If we can prove this, it opens up possibilities in physics that we never thought possible." The room fell completely silent. Jaden's heart pounded in his chest as he waited for a response. He could feel the weight of the moment, and for the first time, he realized that this wasn't just about math. It was about proving to the world, and to himself, that he belonged. After a long pause, an older man in the front row stood up. He was wearing a suit and glasses, his face stern and unreadable. Jaden's stomach tightened as the man began to speak. "Mr. Williams," the man said, his voice calm but firm. "I must say, your theory is Interesting. But this is a bold claim you are making. Zero is a concept that has been understood for centuries. To suggest that it holds the key to unlocking quantum mechanics is, frankly, unsubstantiated. The audience murmured in agreement. Jayden felt a pang of doubt. Here it was, the moment of reckoning. Could he defend his theory against the doubts of the academic elite? He took a deep breath and replied, I understand that it's a bold claim. But math is full of bold claims. Every breakthrough, every discovery, started with someone challenging the status quo. I believe that zero is not just a number, it's the essence of all things. And if we can prove this, we could change everything we know about science. For a moment, the man didn't respond. Then, he sat back down, his eyes fixed on Jayden. The rest of the room fell into an expectant silence. The rest of the presentation passed in a blur. There were more questions, more doubts, but Jayden held his ground. He explained, defended, and answered every challenge with growing confidence. By the end of the session, there was a new energy in the room, an excitement that hadn't been there at the start. When Jayden finally finished, he felt like he had run a marathon. His hands were shaking, his throat dry, but as he looked out at the crowd, he saw something he hadn't expected: respect. There were nods of approval, murmurs of interest, and even a few applause. As Jayden stepped off the stage, Dr. Harper was waiting for him, a proud smile on his face. You did it, Dr. Harper said, pulling him into a quick hug. You've earned their respect, Jayden. I couldn't be prouder. Jayden smiled, the weight of the moment settling in. He had just stepped into the spotlight, and though he had been nervous, unsure, and questioning every move, he had come through it. The world had seen him, not just as a kid with a big idea, but as a scientist with a real, groundbreaking theory. And that was just the beginning. Jayden had barely settled back into his routine after the presentation at the conference when the storm began. It started with a ripple, a few skeptical articles published in online journals questioning his findings. The criticisms weren't harsh at first, just doubts, as if the world wasn't quite ready to accept the possibility that a high school student could have uncovered something as monumental as a new theory about zero. But then the ripple became a wave. The first major challenge came when an established professor in the field of quantum mechanics, Dr. Edwin Marshall, published a paper directly attacking Jayden's theory. Dr. Marshall was one of the most respected names in the field. His decades of work had shaped modern understanding of quantum physics, and his reputation was practically untouchable. The paper, titled The Fallacy of Zero as the Key to Quantum Mechanics, was scathing. In it, Dr. Marshall dismissed Jayden's work as mathematically flawed and conceptually naive. He claimed that Jayden's idea of using zero as a fundamental building block was a misunderstanding of the most basic principles of mathematics and physics. The article spread quickly, with many respected scientists and mathematicians joining the chorus of critics, calling the young theorist's ideas impossible and reckless. Jayden sat at his desk, staring at the screen in disbelief. He had anticipated some pushback. After all, revolutionary ideas rarely go unchallenged. But this? This was something else. Dr. Marshall wasn't just doubting Jayden's work, he was actively trying to tear it apart. It wasn't just an academic disagreement. It felt personal. He could hear Dr. Harper's voice in his head, encouraging him to stay focused. Remember, Jayden, criticism is part of the journey. You've got the truth on your side. Don't let them knock you down. You're not in this alone. But it wasn't just the criticism that stung, it was the doubts that came with it. If one of the most esteemed professors in the world could claim his theory was flawed, then maybe he had made a mistake. Maybe he wasn't ready to play in the big leagues after all. Jayden spent the next few days in a haze, working through the equations again and again, trying to find the flaw that Dr. Marshall had pointed out. But the more he looked, the more confident he became that he had nothing to prove wrong. His theory was solid, he was sure of it. But the weight of the challenge was heavy. The media caught wind of the backlash, and suddenly, Jayden's name was everywhere, associated with both praise and ridicule. His inbox flooded with messages. Some were from well-wishers, offering support and encouragement. But many were from people who were now questioning his intelligence, his credibility, his right to challenge the established norms. One particularly cruel email simply read, "Stick to high school math. Leave the real science to the grown-ups." That one stung. But Jaden's resilience was beginning to show. He knew the road ahead would be rough. After all, it was the nature of breakthroughs to be met with resistance. He remembered the countless great minds in history, Einstein, Curie, and Hawking, who had faced ridicule before their ideas were eventually accepted. Later that week, Jaden received a call from Dr. Harper, who had been closely following the media firestorm. "Jaden, it's time to face this head-on," Dr. Harper said, his voice steady and reassuring. "You know this theory is correct. Now, you need to show the world." Jaden hesitated. "But how? Dr. Marshall is so respected. He's practically untouchable. If he's right, then maybe I'm just a kid with a big idea that doesn't work." Dr. Harper chuckled softly. "You've already proven that your theory works. What you need to do now is make sure everyone else knows it, too. You have the data. You have the results. We're going to get the best minds in the field to back you up. Don't let this scare you. Let it fuel you." Jaden took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "I'm ready. But I need your help." "You've got it," Dr. Harper replied. "We're in this together." The next step was crucial. Dr. Harper introduced Jaden to a network of scientists who had also begun to take notice of the young theorist's work. One of them, Dr. Susan Zhang, was a rising star in the world of quantum physics. Her groundbreaking work on mathematical models of the multiverse had earned her widespread recognition, and she was deeply intrigued by Jaden's theory. Dr. Zhang agreed to meet with Jaden and Dr. Harper in a private session to discuss his findings. The meeting was held in a quiet room at MIT, and as Jaden sat down across from Dr. Zhang, he felt the familiar surge of nervousness. But she wasn't here to criticize him, she was here to listen. "I've read your work, Jaden," Dr. Zhang began, looking at him with a sharp but not unkind gaze. "And I have to say, I'm fascinated by what you're proposing. Zero as a fundamental key to understanding quantum mechanics is ambitious, but it could be groundbreaking. The math checks out." Jaden's heart skipped a beat. You really think so?" She smiled, and for the first time in days, Jaden felt a flicker of hope. "I'm not going to tell you that it's without its challenges. But there's something here. Something that could change the way we think about the universe. I think you need to take your work further. More rigorous testing. More data. We can help you with that." Dr. Harper nodded. "Exactly. We can't let Dr. Marshall's attacks throw us off course. You've got the talent, Jaden. Now let's make sure we back it up with even more evidence. Let's show them that zero isn't just a placeholder. It's a building block." Jaden sat back, overwhelmed by a sense of relief. For the first time since the controversy erupted, he wasn't alone in this. He had people who believed in him, real, respected scientists who were willing to stand by him. Together, they could push the boundaries of what was possible. That night, Jaden stayed up late, reviewing his work one final time before moving on to the next phase of testing. The doubt that had plagued him for days began to melt away. He was more certain than ever that his theory was right. And he wasn't about to let one paper, no matter how influential the author, define his future. As the sun rose the next morning, Jaden felt ready. Ready to prove himself. Ready to face the challenge that lay ahead. Because this was bigger than just one paper. It was about rewriting the rules of science. And Jaden wasn't about to back down now. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The following weeks were a blur of long nights, intense research, and endless calculations. Jayden had thrown himself into refining his theory, now working side by side with Dr. Harper and Dr. Zhang. The doubts that had once crept into his mind had faded, replaced by a fierce determination. He was no longer just trying to prove that his idea was correct, he was on a mission to change the way the world saw mathematics and physics. The next step in proving his theory would be the ultimate test, an experimental trial to confirm the existence of the zero convergence point in real-world physics. If he could demonstrate this scientifically, it would be a game-changer. It would not only silence his critics but also solidify his place in the academic world. Jayden and his team worked tirelessly to prepare for the experiment. The goal was to show how zero, in its theoretical form, could influence the behavior of quantum particles. They had secured access to a high-energy particle accelerator at a leading research facility, a cutting-edge piece of equipment that could provide the data they needed. But the task ahead was daunting. No one had ever attempted something like this before. They were venturing into uncharted territory. Dr. Zhang, who had become Jayden's mentor through this process, was both excited and cautious. "This experiment is crucial, Jayden," she said, as they reviewed the parameters for the 100th time. "If we can get this right, it will validate your theory. But it's not going to be easy. We need precise measurements and flawless execution." Jayden nodded, trying to keep his nerves in check. "I know. I've been over the calculations 1,000 times, and everything aligns. Zero isn't just a number, it's a force, a bridge that connects everything. If we can prove that in this experiment, everything changes." Dr. Harper, who had been guiding Jayden throughout his journey, gave him an encouraging smile. "You've come a long way, kid. I believe in you. Now let's show the world what you've got." The day of the experiment arrived, and Jayden stood in front of the massive particle accelerator, surrounded by researchers and scientists from all over the world. The facility was buzzing with activity, the hum of machines and the sharp clicking of keyboards filling the air as data streams were set up and prepared for the test. Jayden's heart raced as he gazed at the equipment, knowing that everything would hinge on this moment. He had spent countless hours reviewing the equations, running simulations, and preparing the models that would guide the experiment. This wasn't just a test of his theory, it was a test of his belief in himself. Could his hypothesis really change the world? Could zero be the key to unlocking the secrets of the universe? Dr. Zhang stood beside him, her face a mask of concentration. "We've got one shot at this, Jayden. The accelerator is set to run a series of collisions that will produce high-energy particles. We'll use those collisions to measure the behavior of the quantum fields. If your theory is correct, we should see anomalies that confirm the zero convergence point." Jayden nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. He wasn't just a high school student anymore. He wasn't just the kid who had been laughed at. He was a scientist, standing on the edge of something extraordinary. The countdown began. The accelerator roared to life, its powerful magnets activating, creating the high-energy environment necessary for the collisions. Scientists and technicians scrambled to monitor the equipment, adjusting controls and analyzing the real-time data streaming in. Jayden's hands were clammy as he watched the monitor. The first particle collision occurred, sending a cascade of data across the screen. Everyone held their breath as the numbers flashed, the graphs oscillating wildly as the particles reacted. But nothing in the data suggested anything out of the ordinary. Jayden's heart skipped a beat. Was this it? Had they missed something? Was the theory wrong? But then, as the second set of collisions occurred, something changed. On the monitor, a sudden and unexpected anomaly appeared, something that should not have been possible according to existing theories of physics. The data spiked, and for a moment, the readings showed a perfect, symmetrical pattern, as though the quantum fields themselves were aligning in a way no one had ever predicted. Jayden's pulse quickened. This was it. This was the proof he had been waiting for. "Dr. Zhang, look at this," he exclaimed, pointing to the screen. "It's exactly what I predicted. The zero convergence point is real. Dr. Zhang squinted at the monitor, her eyes widening as she saw the anomaly. This is incredible. We need to run another set of tests, confirm the readings. This can't just be a fluke. They ran the test again, and the results were the same. The anomaly appeared every single time the quantum fields collided. Jaden's theory, the idea that 0 was not just a number but a fundamental building block of the universe, had been proven. The room erupted in excitement. Researchers who had been skeptical just days ago were now on their feet, clapping and cheering. Even Dr. Marshall, who had been one of Jaden's harshest critics, was standing silently at the back of the room, his expression unreadable. Jaden could barely comprehend what was happening. The numbers, the data, it all pointed to the same conclusion. He had done it. He had proven that 0 was not just a concept in mathematics, but a real, measurable force that governed the very fabric of reality. The implications were staggering. Dr. Harper clapped Jaden on the back. "You did it, kid. You really did it." But Jaden wasn't thinking about the applause, the validation, or the recognition. His mind was racing, focused entirely on the data. "We need to publish this immediately," he said, his voice sharp with determination. "This is going to change everything. I need to make sure the world knows this is real." Dr. Zhang smiled, a proud twinkle in her eye. "And you will, Jaden. We'll write the paper together. We'll present this to the world." As the excitement in the room died down, Jaden felt a sense of calm wash over him. The hard work, the doubts, the challenges, all of it had led to this moment. He had faced the greatest test of his life, and he had passed. The world would never look at 0 the same way again. But Jaden knew that this was just the beginning. There was so much more to discover, so much more to explore. He had opened a door to a new understanding of the universe, but now it was time to walk through it. He wasn't finished. He was just getting started. The day after the experiment, the world had already begun to react. Jaden's breakthrough had spread like wildfire across social media, scientific journals, and news outlets. Everywhere he turned, there was another headline, another interview, or another invitation to speak at a conference. What had started as an idea shared in the quiet of his classroom had exploded into a global sensation. Jaden's phone buzzed constantly, filling his inbox with messages from scientists, journalists, and even curious onlookers. Some praised him for his brilliance, while others, still skeptical, questioned the legitimacy of his findings. He had gone from being a shy high school student to one of the most talked about names in science, and with that fame came a new set of challenges. The first test came when a panel of renowned physicists from around the world invited him to debate the validity of his theory at a live-streamed conference. The event would be a public spectacle, watched by thousands of academics and laypeople alike. Jaden knew this was his chance to solidify his place in the scientific community, but he also felt the weight of the situation. He wasn't just defending a theory anymore, he was defending his reputation, his integrity, and his future. The conference took place at the prestigious Large Hadron Collider facility in Geneva, Switzerland. Jaden arrived the night before the event, feeling a mixture of excitement and anxiety. He stood in front of the glass windows of his hotel room, looking out over the sparkling city lights, trying to steady his nerves. Dr. Zhang had flown in to be with him for moral support, and Dr. Harper was on the phone constantly, offering advice and encouragement. But despite their support, Jaden felt incredibly alone. The upcoming debate would be one of the most important moments of his life, and the pressure was suffocating. "Are you ready for this?" Dr. Zhang asked, appearing beside him in the hotel room, her eyes filled with both pride and concern. Jaden turned to her, his heart pounding. "I'm not sure. What if they tear my theory apart? What if everything I've worked for falls apart in front of millions of people?" Dr. Zhang smiled gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Jaden, your theory is real. We've seen the data. We know it's true. Don't let them distract you with doubts. You've already proven this, and now it's time to show the world." Jaden nodded, trying to calm his racing thoughts. Right. I've got this. I just have to stay focused. The next day, Jayden stood on stage, facing an audience of thousands, both in the auditorium and online. The debate panel was filled with some of the biggest names in physics, including Dr. Marshall, who had been one of his harshest critics. Dr. Marshall's face was unreadable as he sat across from Jayden, his arms crossed and his expression cold. The debate began with the moderator asking Dr. Marshall to present his views on Jayden's theory. As expected, the seasoned physicist dismissed Jayden's findings as young enthusiasm masquerading as groundbreaking science. He argued that the concept of zero as a fundamental force went against centuries of established scientific understanding and that Jayden's results were likely due to experimental error. Jayden listened quietly, his palms sweaty as he sat in the hot seat. The words felt like daggers, each one cutting deeper into his resolve. But instead of shrinking under the pressure, he found a quiet confidence. This was his moment. When it was his turn, Jayden stood and addressed the panel and the audience with a calm voice. Dr. Marshall, with all due respect, I understand why you're skeptical. This idea challenges the very foundation of modern physics. But we've already proven it. The data from the experiment is clear. The zero convergence point exists. It's not just a theoretical concept anymore, it's a fact. He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. I don't expect everyone to accept my theory right away. But I believe that science isn't about blindly following tradition. It's about questioning the status quo, seeking truth, and being willing to accept that the universe is far more complex than we may understand. There was a brief silence before Dr. Marshall spoke up, his tone harsh but not without a hint of respect. You're very brave for a teenager, Jayden. But bravery doesn't change the laws of nature. Jayden smiled faintly. Maybe not. But sometimes, it takes someone who hasn't been taught to believe the way things should be to see the way things truly are. The crowd murmured, and Jayden could feel the shift. He wasn't just defending his theory anymore, he was challenging the very mindset that had held back progress in science. It was a bold move, and one that left an impression. The debate lasted for hours, with Jayden and Dr. Marshall exchanging pointed arguments, presenting data, and dissecting each other's views. While Dr. Marshall's critiques were sharp, Jayden's calm, methodical responses slowly began to win the audience over. Even the skeptical panel members, who had once dismissed his theory outright, began to take his point seriously. By the end of the debate, Jayden was exhausted. His voice was hoarse, and his mind was racing. But as the debate concluded, he could see it in the faces of the audience, something had shifted. He hadn't just defended his theory. He had opened minds. The following days were a whirlwind. The media coverage was intense, with many outlets praising Jayden for his poise and clarity in the face of such fierce opposition. While Dr. Marshall's supporters remained steadfast, the growing number of scientists who had initially doubted Jayden were starting to come around. The data, after all, didn't lie. Dr. Zhang called him after the debate, her voice full of excitement. Jayden, you were amazing. I think you've really won over some of the toughest critics. People are starting to see your theory in a new light. Jayden couldn't help but smile. It feels good to finally be heard. But the real work is still ahead. I need to make sure this idea gets the recognition it deserves. Don't worry, Dr. Zhang said. You've already changed the conversation. Now, let's make sure the world listens. But as Jayden continued to push forward, the challenges didn't stop. In the weeks that followed, he received messages from other physicists offering both praise and critique. Some called him a genius, while others labeled him an outsider trying to rewrite science without understanding it fully. And then came the next obstacle, a new paper published by Dr. Marshall, claiming that Jayden's findings were a result of misinterpretation of the data. The skepticism hadn't gone away. In fact, it had intensified. But Jayden didn't back down. He had already faced the impossible and proven that he was right. Now, the world was finally starting to take notice. And he wasn't about to let a few doubters stop him from finishing what he had started. As the weeks went by, Jaden's world continued to shift beneath him. What had once been a quiet dream, hidden in the confines of his mind, was now spreading like a ripple across the scientific community. The debate had been the beginning, but it was the aftermath that would truly test him. After his public confrontation with Dr. Marshall, Jaden had thought things might calm down. He had been naive. The reaction to his theory had been mixed, as expected, but it was becoming clear that the opposition wasn't just about science, it was personal. Everywhere he went, Jaden heard whispers. Some scientists supported him, others dismissed him as an upstart with no understanding of the field. The media coverage was relentless, with news outlets flipping back and forth between calling him a revolutionary and a fraud. Some hailed him as the future of physics, others accused him of sensationalizing a misstep in experimental data. But the most difficult part came in the form of an email that Jaden received late one night, a message that would change everything. It was from Dr. Zhang. Jaden opened it, expecting the usual words of encouragement, but instead, he found something that shook him to his core. Jaden, the email began, "I'm sorry to have to send you this, but I need to be completely honest with you. I've been in talks with several high-profile physicists who believe your theory could be groundbreaking, but they also believe there's a possibility that your experiments have been misinterpreted. I'm concerned that you might be rushing ahead too quickly without fully understanding the implications of your findings. They want to collaborate with you, but they have concerns about your lack of formal training." Jaden's heart sank as he read the words. Was this betrayal? No, it wasn't betrayal. It was fear. Dr. Zhang had always been his mentor, guiding him with the wisdom that only years of experience could offer. She had been one of the first to believe in him, to stand by him when the world laughed. But now, it seemed that even she had doubts. Was it because of the pressure from other scientists? Or had the criticisms of his work finally broken through her confidence? He could feel his hands shaking as he read the last line, "Please think carefully, Jaden. You've come so far, but you may need more time to truly understand the magnitude of your work." The email left him speechless, sitting in the silence of his room. It wasn't just Dr. Zhang's words that hurt, it was the fact that the world was closing in. The whole scientific community seemed to be splitting into two camps, those who believed in him and those who didn't. The weight of it was suffocating. Jaden's mind raced. He had been so sure of himself. His experiments had been thorough. The data was real. And yet, this doubt, this question about his understanding of the work, was a poison. Suddenly, his phone buzzed, breaking through the haze of his thoughts. It was Dr. Harper. "Jaden, we need to talk," the message read. "Can you meet me tomorrow at the lab? I've got something important to discuss." The next day, Jaden met Dr. Harper at the university lab. The familiar whiteboard was filled with equations, the sharp smell of chemicals in the air. Dr. Harper was pacing the room, his face serious, which was a rare sight for the usually laid-back scientist. Jaden took a deep breath before speaking. "I got the email from Dr. Zhang. She's worried that I'm rushing things. That I might not fully understand the implications of my work." Dr. Harper stopped pacing and turned to face him. "I know. I've been talking with her too. And while I agree that you're taking big risks, I don't think you should stop now. Your theory is solid, Jaden. What Dr. Zhang is worried about is the backlash from the establishment. They don't like being proven wrong, especially not by a teenager." Jaden looked down at his hands. "But what if she's right? What if I've missed something? What if I've been too focused on proving my point that I didn't stop to fully grasp the consequences of my work?" Dr. Harper sighed and sat down at the desk, motioning for Jaden to do the same. "Jaden, the only way you can be certain about your findings is to continue pushing forward. Science doesn't wait for anyone to feel ready. It's messy, it's uncomfortable, and it's often filled with doubt. But that's the nature of progress. The greats, Einstein, Curie, Hawking, they all faced this same kind of skepticism. What sets them apart isn't that they were certain, it's that they were willing to keep going despite the doubts. Especially their own. Jayden stared at the floor for a moment, taking in the weight of Dr. Harper's words. But what if it's too much? What if I can't handle the pressure? You can handle it, Dr. Harper said firmly, leaning forward. You've already done something most scientists dream of doing. You've shown that a radical idea can be real. You've changed the conversation. But now you have to see it through. Don't let fear dictate your path. Jayden met his mentor's gaze. He could see the quiet confidence in Dr. Harper's eyes. He had always been the one person who never doubted him, even when the world had laughed. So, you're telling me I should keep going? Yes. But you're going to need a team. You can't do this alone anymore. You need experts in various fields, people who can help refine your theory and ensure that you're on the right path. You need to collaborate. Bring in people who can challenge your assumptions and help you see where you might be wrong. If your theory is truly groundbreaking, it will stand up to scrutiny. But if it's wrong, you need to find out now before you go any further. Jayden felt the weight of Dr. Harper's words. He wasn't just fighting for the world to believe in him anymore. He was fighting for the truth. And the truth was worth the fight. That evening, Jayden sat alone in his room, reflecting on everything. The pressure, the emails, the doubts, he realized they were all part of the journey. It wasn't supposed to be easy. The road to discovery had always been filled with obstacles. The world hadn't been kind to the people who changed it, but in the end, those were the people who left their mark. As he sat in silence, a new sense of resolve filled him. It wasn't just about proving Dr. Marshall wrong, or even proving Dr. Zhang wrong. It was about proving the idea of zero, and its place in the universe, was true, regardless of the opinions around it. Jayden stood up, determination rising within him. He wouldn't let fear or doubt hold him back anymore. He had come this far. Now, he would finish what he had started. Tomorrow, he would begin putting together a new team, one that would help him push the boundaries of science even further. No more doubts. No more hesitation. The journey was far from over. Jayden had made a decision. He was no longer going to walk this path alone. The weight of the journey had become too great to bear on his shoulders alone, and it was clear that if he was going to push his theory to the next level, he needed a team, experts who could offer their insight, challenge his assumptions, and guide him through the scientific minefield he was navigating. Over the past week, he had reached out to some of the brightest minds in the field, professors, researchers, and experimentalists who were open-minded enough to consider the implications of his work. One by one, they agreed to meet. They were intrigued by Jayden's boldness, impressed by the data he had collected, and some even found themselves captivated by the potential of his theory. But it was the first meeting, a gathering of minds with different backgrounds and specialties, that would mark the true turning point. Jayden entered the large conference room of the university lab, where the group had assembled. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation and skepticism. These scientists were not easily swayed by flashy ideas. They needed facts. They needed evidence. And Jayden was prepared to give them exactly that. Dr. Harper had been instrumental in assembling the team. He had invited Dr. Aria Sinclair, a renowned mathematician who specialized in abstract theories, and Dr. Lucas Evers, a physicist with a reputation for his work on quantum mechanics. The group also included Dr. Natalie Kim, an experimental physicist with expertise in advanced particle detection, and Dr. Alberto Rossi, a computational expert who had built simulations for some of the most complex scientific models. They sat around the table, looking at Jayden, who stood in front of a large whiteboard filled with complex equations and diagrams. Each of them was processing the information in their own way, trying to make sense of the strange new theory that Jayden had presented to the world. Dr. Sinclair, the first to speak, adjusted her glasses and leaned forward. "I'll admit, I was skeptical at first. But looking at your data, I see potential. Zero as a force, on the surface, it seems absurd. But the equations you've presented, particularly the energy transfers, they can't be easily dismissed. There's something here. Jayden felt a wave of relief. The fact that a mathematician of Dr. Sinclair's caliber was taking his work seriously meant that he had a real chance. He quickly moved to the whiteboard, pointing to a set of equations he had been refining over the past few days. This is the key. The concept of zero not just as an absence, but as a dynamic force, one that can alter the fabric of spacetime. If we look at these equations with the assumption that zero can be treated as a variable that fluctuates, then it changes how we understand gravitational forces and even dark matter. Dr. Evers raised an eyebrow. Wait, you're suggesting that zero could influence something as fundamental as gravity? That's a big claim, Jayden. I know, Jayden said, his voice steady but filled with passion. But if we're looking at this in terms of energy fields, the zero convergence point seems to be influencing the way energy behaves at a quantum level. We're talking about zero's potential to create a new kind of wave, a force that could be harnessed, much like how we harness electromagnetic energy. Dr. Rossi, who had been sitting quietly, typing away on his laptop, finally spoke up. I've been running some simulations based on your data. There's something very peculiar here. If your theory holds true, this would explain anomalies in particle behavior that we've observed in high-energy physics experiments. The problem is, the math doesn't match with what we know about traditional physics. But if we modify our understanding of zero, we might actually be able to reconcile these discrepancies. Dr. Kim, who had been analyzing the experimental data Jayden had presented, looked up from her notes. The experiments are the most convincing part of this. The data from your particle detectors, it's unlike anything I've ever seen before. The readings suggest fluctuations in energy that defy current models. But we'll need to conduct further tests to validate it. Jayden nodded eagerly. I'm ready. We can run more experiments. We need to see if we can replicate the results and take this to the next level. This theory could change everything, but we need to prove it. For the next several hours, the team continued to discuss the implications of Jayden's theory. They delved into complex equations, analyzed experimental data, and brainstormed potential tests that could confirm, or disprove, the theory. It was an exhausting session, but Jayden felt a spark of hope he hadn't felt in weeks. For the first time, he was surrounded by people who believed in the potential of his idea. They weren't just criticizing him. They were helping him make it better. As the meeting drew to a close, Dr. Sinclair leaned back in her chair and looked at Jayden with a thoughtful expression. I think you're onto something, Jayden. But we need to be careful. This could change the way we think about the universe. If we're wrong, it could set science back by decades. If we're right, she paused, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Then we're on the verge of something monumental. Jayden felt a rush of energy flood through him. It was a turning point, no doubt. The future of his theory no longer depended on a single individual or a single set of experiments. It was now a collective effort. A team of brilliant minds working together to uncover the truth. The days that followed were a blur. The team worked tirelessly, running tests, analyzing data, and refining their equations. The media continued to buzz with speculation, but Jayden kept his focus on the science. There were moments of doubt, moments when it felt like they were getting nowhere. But there were also breakthroughs, small, incremental changes that pushed the theory forward. The team's collaboration was starting to yield results. Jayden was finally starting to see the bigger picture. The zero convergence point was real, and with each new piece of data, it became clearer that his theory could explain phenomena that had once seemed unexplainable. This was no longer just a child's wild idea, it was the foundation for a new way of understanding the universe. One evening, after another long day in the lab, Jayden sat alone in front of his computer, going over the most recent test results. His eyes scanned the numbers, the equations, and the charts. Suddenly, something clicked. One of the simulations had produced an unexpected result, a perfect alignment between the energy fluctuations and gravitational anomalies that he had predicted. He could hardly believe it. This was it. This was the breakthrough he had been waiting for. His hands trembled as he typed up the results, preparing to share them with the team the next morning. This wasn't just a step forward. This was the confirmation they had all been working toward. Zero was not just an absence, it was a force that could reshape everything. Jaden leaned back in his chair, a smile slowly forming on his face. The journey was far from over, but in that moment, he knew he had reached a turning point. The world might not be ready for what was coming, but he was. And with his team by his side, there was no limit to what they could achieve. The morning after Jaden had made his unexpected discovery, he barely slept. His mind was racing, excited, but also unsure of what came next. What he had found in the simulation was huge, possibly revolutionary, but it needed to be tested again. And again. The data had shown a perfect alignment between the energy fluctuations predicted by his theory and actual gravitational anomalies that had been detected in other experiments. But one breakthrough didn't make a theory. Not yet. By the time Jaden arrived at the lab, his team had already gathered, ready to dive into the new simulation results. Dr. Harper was there, already scribbling notes on the whiteboard. Dr. Sinclair had her laptop open, and Dr. Kim was preparing new experimental setups. The energy in the room was electric, each of them knew this could be the moment they had been waiting for. "I've reviewed the data," Jaden began, his voice steady but filled with anticipation. "I think I've found the key to proving the zero convergence point is real. We're seeing the exact type of energy fluctuation we've predicted in simulations, and it aligns with gravitational anomalies. This could confirm the theory. But we need to run more tests." Dr. Evers, who had been quiet up until this point, looked up from his tablet. "You're saying the data matches, Jaden?" "Like, perfectly." Jaden nodded. "Yes. The energy fluctuations are exactly what we hypothesized, and they correspond to gravitational shifts we've seen in other high-energy physics experiments. If we test this again and it holds up, we may have the first real proof that zero is a force we can manipulate." Dr. Rossi's eyes widened as he quickly opened a new simulation on his laptop. "Let's not waste any time. I can run an experimental check immediately." The team scrambled into action, dividing tasks as they worked together to ensure that every possible variable was controlled. Jaden couldn't remember the last time he had felt so alive, so sure of what they were doing. For the first time since he had started this journey, everything felt like it was falling into place. The chaos of the early days was behind him, and now it was about focusing, testing, and refining. This was the path towards something truly groundbreaking. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity, calculating energy levels, adjusting the experimental setup, and running simulations again and again. Jaden worked alongside Dr. Kim, watching the sensors carefully, while Dr. Sinclair ran her mathematical models. Dr. Harper and Dr. Evers checked the equations, recalibrating instruments and ensuring that every measurement was as accurate as possible. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the test was ready. The team gathered around the control panel, hands poised over keyboards, eyes glued to the monitors. Jaden felt his heartbeat quicken as Dr. Rossi clicked the button to initiate the experiment. For a long moment, nothing happened. The screens showed lines of data, but it wasn't clear whether they were anything more than a flurry of random fluctuations. Jaden's stomach dropped. Was it a fluke? Was his discovery wrong? Then, slowly, a pattern began to emerge. The data began to settle into something familiar. The fluctuations in energy mirrored exactly what they had seen in their simulations. And, even more remarkably, the gravitational shifts they had measured lined up with Jaden's predicted zero convergence point. "Yes," Dr. Kim whispered, her voice filled with awe. "It's real. The data's consistent. The fluctuations match perfectly." A stunned silence followed, the room filled only with the hum of equipment and the sound of lab technicians taking notes. It was as if time had stopped for a moment. Jaden could hardly believe what he was seeing. Dr. Harper broke the silence with a grin. I think we've just done it. We've proved the theory. Jayden stood there, dazed. But, how is this possible? He muttered to himself. This changes everything. If zero is a force, then. Dr. Sinclair smiled as she walked up to Jayden, slapping him on the back. You did it. You actually did it, Jayden. Jayden turned to face the team, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had dreamed of this moment, but now that it had arrived, it felt almost surreal. For so long, he had been laughed at, doubted, questioned. And now, with hard work and collaboration, they had proved something that the world would have never imagined possible. But as the realization set in, something else occurred to Jayden. This was just the beginning. They had made a major breakthrough, yes, but now they would have to share their findings with the world. They were no longer just a small team of scientists working in secrecy. This discovery would soon ripple out, affecting the entire scientific community. The news of the breakthrough spread faster than Jayden could have anticipated. Within hours, the team's success was all over the scientific journals. Media outlets picked up the story, and soon, the press conferences began. The once dismissed theory of zero being a force was now a legitimate topic of discussion, with articles, debates, and interviews springing up all over the world. Jayden found himself thrust into the spotlight. In the days following the announcement, he was interviewed by news outlets, asked to speak at conferences, and invited to collaborate with other physicists who wanted to work on expanding the theory. While part of him was thrilled, this was the moment he had been waiting for, the other part of him felt overwhelmed. It was one thing to present a theory in a classroom, or even within a small team of scientists. It was another to face the entire scientific world. Dr. Harper, as always, was there to guide him. This is just the beginning, Jayden. You've proven your theory, but now the real work begins. You'll need to be careful. The scientific community can be fickle. One moment, they'll praise you, and the next, they'll tear you apart. But you've earned their respect. Jayden nodded, feeling the weight of his mentor's words. He had never been the kind of person to seek fame. But he knew this discovery would change the course of science forever, and with it came responsibility. He had to be prepared for the challenges ahead. A few weeks later, Jayden and his team were invited to present their findings at a global physics conference in Geneva. The anticipation was palpable. Scientists from all over the world had heard of Jayden's work, and they wanted to see it for themselves. It was one of the most important events of his life, a moment when his work would be examined and scrutinized on an international stage. The room was packed when Jayden took the stage. His heart pounded in his chest as he adjusted the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces. For a brief moment, his mind went blank, but then he saw Dr. Harper sitting in the front row, giving him an encouraging nod. Jayden took a deep breath and began. "Thank you all for being here," he started, his voice steady. "I'm here to present the theory that has completely changed the way we understand the universe. My team and I have discovered that zero, long considered a mere placeholder or absence, can actually be a dynamic force, influencing energy fields and gravitational forces in ways we never thought possible." As he continued his presentation, Jayden explained the research, the tests, and the results. His confidence grew with each slide. This was his moment. And no matter what happened next, he knew that the world would never be the same again. By the end of the conference, Jayden had done what he had set out to do. His theory had not only been proven, it had been embraced by the scientific community. The question was no longer whether zero was a force, the question was how to harness that force for the future. Jayden looked out at the audience one last time, a sense of pride swelling inside him. He had proven them all wrong. He had proven that a simple equation could change the course of history. And, most importantly, he had done it. He had made his dream a reality. Jayden's world had shifted. A month had passed since the global conference in Geneva, and the scientific community had fully embraced his discovery. The media continued to buzz with excitement, articles were written, and scientists were beginning to rethink long-standing theories in light of his findings. But even though Jaden had succeeded in proving that zero was a force, he knew that this was just the first step. What had started as a theory had now transformed into a new scientific frontier, one that he couldn't explore alone. Every day brought new challenges. New questions. New possibilities. Jaden could no longer simply think about equations and simulations. Now, he had to think about the practical applications, the ethics of his discovery, and the risks of pushing science into uncharted territory. As much as Jaden enjoyed the attention, there were moments when he longed for the simplicity of his early experiments in the lab. When it was just him and his team, working late into the night, trying to make sense of the universe. Now, he was surrounded by a crowd of curious minds, investors, and media personnel eager to turn his groundbreaking theory into something far bigger than he had ever imagined. One day, as he sat in a conference room with Dr. Harper, Dr. Sinclair, and the rest of the team, a sense of unease settled over him. There was a new energy in the room, a subtle tension that hadn't been there before. Dr. Harper was reviewing a proposal from a large tech corporation that wanted to invest in the team's research, hoping to turn Jaden's theory into a practical application that could revolutionize energy production and quantum computing. "I don't know, Jaden," Dr. Harper said, looking up from the document. "This deal with the tech company is tempting. They're offering us millions to fund our next phase of research. But we need to be careful. Their intentions might not align with ours. They want to take your discoveries and apply them for profit, and that's a different world from the one we've been working in." Jaden leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The idea of having the funding to continue his research was appealing, but something about the corporate interests felt wrong. He hadn't signed up for this kind of attention. He had wanted to uncover the secrets of the universe, not become part of a corporate machine that would dictate how his discoveries were used. "I get what you're saying," Jaden replied slowly. "But what if we could use that funding to do something truly important? What if we could make renewable energy more accessible, solve energy crises, or even change how we understand quantum computing? The potential for good is enormous. I don't know who to trust anymore." Dr. Sinclair, ever the mathematician, folded her arms and gave him a measured look. "It's not just about trust, Jaden. It's about how we navigate this new frontier. We need to stay true to the science, not the market. If we start compromising for funding or publicity, we might lose sight of what really matters. We've already seen how the media can sensationalize our work. We can't let that happen with corporate interests." Jaden nodded, the weight of the decision sinking in. He understood the danger of becoming a pawn in someone else's game. But at the same time, he knew that the resources and connections these companies had could push their research into areas he hadn't even thought of yet. It was the classic dilemma: take the money and run with it, or refuse the deal and risk slowing down progress. "I think we need a middle ground," Jaden said finally, his voice steady. "We can't let this become about profit. But if we can make sure that the applications of our work are ethical, that they serve humanity and not just corporate greed, maybe we can work together. We don't have to give up our values just because we accept help." Dr. Harper nodded, looking pleased with Jaden's response. "That's a wise approach. We'll have to set clear terms. If we're going to work with them, it needs to be on our terms. And we need to stay focused on the bigger picture." The conversation was far from over, but Jaden felt a little better. The team was united, and their sense of purpose hadn't been compromised. They knew that the world would want answers quickly, and the pressure to commercialize their discoveries was immense. But the science had to come first. A few days later, after a series of tense negotiations, Jaden and his team had reached a compromise with the tech corporation. The company would fund their research, but they would have strict oversight on how the findings were applied. The team had a say in every decision, and the focus remained on advancing the science, not just turning a profit. As the months passed, the team made groundbreaking strides. They were able to replicate the zero convergence point in a controlled environment, creating an energy field that could bend spacetime at a microscopic level. The applications were limitless: from quantum computing to gravitational manipulation to energy production. Jaden felt a surge of excitement every time they made a new discovery, but he also felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. With each breakthrough, he saw the potential for both good and bad. If the wrong hands got a hold of this technology, it could be disastrous. The thought kept him up at night. But Jaden refused to let fear control him. The world needed answers, and it was up to him and his team to ensure those answers were used for the right reasons. One day, while walking through the lab, Jaden was approached by Dr. Sinclair, who had been running some of the latest tests on their energy manipulation experiments. "Jaden, you need to see this," she said, her eyes wide with excitement. Jaden followed her to one of the monitors, where an energy field was being manipulated in real time. The data showed that the energy fluctuations, once thought to be impossible to control, were now being stabilized. "This is it," Jaden whispered. "We've done it. We've created a sustainable energy source. This could change the world." Dr. Sinclair grinned, her eyes sparkling. "This is just the beginning. We're on the brink of something even bigger." But even as Jaden felt the thrill of their success, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was too much at stake. The eyes of the world were on them, and the pressure was mounting. Every step they took was being watched, scrutinized. And as much as he wanted to believe in the good that their work could do, he knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, both scientific and ethical. Weeks passed, and the pressure continued to grow. Jaden's phone buzzed constantly with requests for interviews, partnerships, and offers to speak at international forums. His email inbox was flooded with inquiries from governments, corporations, and organizations, all eager to capitalize on his discovery. But the questions that weighed most heavily on his mind were those that he couldn't answer, questions about the moral implications of their work. How far should they push this technology? What would happen if it fell into the wrong hands? And perhaps most troubling of all, Jaden began to wonder, were they changing the world for the better, or were they merely accelerating a future they couldn't predict? He had no answers. Not yet. The following months felt like a whirlwind for Jaden. The excitement surrounding his discovery was now a constant presence, woven into every part of his daily life. But beneath the surface of triumph, there was a growing sense of unease that he couldn't shake. The implications of his work were becoming more profound and more dangerous with each passing day. For every door they opened in the world of science, there seemed to be another door that remained ominously closed, until now. Jaden sat at his desk in the lab, staring at the screen in front of him, where the latest experiment data was running through the system. It was the same experiment they had been running for weeks, but today something was different. The energy fluctuations they had been manipulating were now producing unexpected results. Not dangerous, at least, not yet, but different. He called over Dr. Harper and Dr. Sinclair, who had both been part of the project since the beginning. The two of them joined him, and they began running through the data, trying to make sense of what was happening. "I don't understand," Dr. Sinclair said, pointing to the screen. "The energy fluctuations are amplifying. They're off the charts, but in a way we've never seen before. It's as if they're reacting to something else, something beyond the scope of our original models." Jaden frowned, running a hand through his hair. "Can we stabilize it?" he asked, though he already feared the answer. "We can try," Dr. Harper said cautiously. "But these are unprecedented readings. If we don't have control over it soon, we could trigger something much worse." The weight of his words hit Jaden like a ton of bricks. He had never wanted to push the boundaries of physics so far that it would risk their safety. But here they were, staring at the first signs of their theory potentially going too far. "I think we need to halt the experiment," Jaden said, voice firm but tinged with uncertainty. "We need to rework the model and recalibrate everything. We're not ready for this." But Dr. Sinclair shook her head. "Jaden, we can't just stop now. We're on the edge of something major. If we pull back now, we'll lose our chance to truly understand Zero's full potential. We can't just ignore this." We need to dig deeper. There was an urgency in her voice, a kind of desperation that Jaden hadn't expected. It was as if the power of the discovery was too great to simply let go. Jaden didn't have a ready answer. In his gut, he knew that they were standing at a precipice, one wrong move, and everything could spiral out of control. He glanced at the monitor again. The energy fluctuations weren't just spiking, they were becoming more chaotic, like a wild storm that had no intention of settling. "We'll take it slow," he said finally. "No risks. If it looks like we're heading into dangerous territory, we pull back immediately." The team agreed, though Jaden could see that the spark of excitement had been replaced with a subtle tension. Everyone was on edge. And that night, as the experiment continued, Jaden couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing with fire. Every test they ran, every new result, felt like a risk that could change the world in ways they hadn't even considered. By the time they wrapped up the experiment that evening, Jaden's mind was racing. He had stayed in the lab later than usual, watching the data pour in, his eyes fixated on the screens in front of him. Every detail seemed important, and yet, he couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something was wrong. The following morning, he was jolted awake by a call. It was Dr. Harper. "Jaden, you need to see this," he said urgently. "There's been a significant anomaly in the energy readings from last night. The data is showing something we weren't expecting." Jaden immediately grabbed his coat and rushed to the lab, where the team had already gathered around the computer. Dr. Harper pointed to the screen, where the anomaly was visible. The energy fluctuations had become almost violent, with sharp, erratic spikes that threatened to tear the system apart. The worst part was that the spikes weren't stopping. They were intensifying. "This shouldn't be happening," Jaden murmured, looking at the data again. "We've never seen anything like this before." Dr. Sinclair was visibly shaken. "If we don't stop this now, it could overload the system. We might lose everything we've worked for." Jaden stood frozen, staring at the screen. This wasn't just a technical issue. This was a sign that their research had gone too far. They had unlocked something they weren't prepared to control, and now it was threatening to spiral out of their hands. "Shut it down," he ordered, his voice resolute. Dr. Harper nodded and quickly initiated the shutdown sequence. The machines hummed and buzzed as they powered down, but the data still flickered on the screen. The fluctuations were still present, even though the system was no longer running. Jaden's stomach churned. "It's not stopping. Why isn't it stopping?" Then, as if on cue, the building lights flickered, and the power to the entire facility cut out. The lab was plunged into darkness. For a long moment, the team stood in stunned silence, waiting for the power to come back on. When the lights finally returned, Jaden turned to the team, his mind racing. This wasn't a simple glitch. This was something more. In the following days, the team worked tirelessly to understand the consequences of their actions. They discovered that the energy fluctuations were not only persistent, they were expanding. The anomaly was no longer confined to the lab. Reports came in from nearby areas, indicating strange energy surges in the city. "This is bad," Dr. Evers said, his voice low. "If we can't get control of this, we could be looking at something much worse than we imagined. These energy surges could destabilize the city's grid, or worse, affect other systems we haven't even considered." Jaden's mind raced as he thought about the ramifications of their work. What had they unleashed? Could they reverse it? And if they couldn't, would they be responsible for what happened next? The team gathered around, trying to develop a plan. The data showed that the energy surges seemed to be feeding off of the simulations they had been running, as if their experiments had opened a rift that wasn't just altering energy, it was creating new, unpredictable forces in the surrounding environment. "We have to isolate the source," Jaden said, trying to focus. "We need to understand what's happening before it gets worse." But the more they investigated, the more it became clear, they didn't fully understand what they had unlocked. The theory of zero as a force had opened doors that they weren't ready to walk through, and now they had no idea where it would lead. As Jaden sat alone in the lab that night, watching the simulation results on his own, a sinking feeling washed over him. The unknown consequences of their work were beginning to unfold in ways they hadn't expected. Was the energy surge just the beginning? What had they really tapped into? And more importantly, was it too late to stop it? The days that followed felt like a blur of confusion and fear. The power surge in the lab had been only the beginning. What they had unleashed now spread far beyond the walls of their facility. The energy fluctuations were no longer just localized phenomena, they had begun to ripple out, affecting the electrical grids in the surrounding cities and even causing strange anomalies in other parts of the world. News outlets were buzzing with reports of unexplained power outages, bizarre electromagnetic interference, and reports of strange disturbances in various parts of the planet. Some scientists were calling it a once-in-a-lifetime event, but Jaden and his team knew better. They knew they had caused this. The only question now was whether they could stop it. Jaden sat at the table in the lab, a pile of reports in front of him, trying to make sense of it all. The energy spikes had gotten worse, not better. Every test they conducted seemed to create a new disturbance. They couldn't pinpoint the exact cause, but it was clear that the energy fluctuations were linked to the experiments they had been running on the concept of zero. "We've crossed a line," Dr. Harper said grimly, his voice tired. "What we're doing, what we've done, it's like we're playing with the fabric of the universe itself." Jaden looked up, meeting Dr. Harper's eyes. He knew the truth in those words all too well. This wasn't just about quantum mechanics anymore, it was about something bigger. Something far more dangerous. "The surge," Jaden said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "It's connected to the convergence point. But we didn't account for the scale. We only tested small variables. We never expected something this massive. We didn't expect to find a force that could destabilize entire systems," Dr. Sinclair interjected, her hands shaking slightly as she flipped through the reports. "I've been analyzing the data all night, and it's clear now that the energy we're releasing doesn't behave according to any existing model. We've triggered something that's fundamentally altering the way energy behaves." There was silence in the room as the team processed her words. Jaden felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, heavier than it had ever been before. They had cracked open the door to a new scientific frontier, but what if that door led them to a dead end? What if they had just opened Pandora's box, and there was no way to close it? "We have to contain this," Jaden said finally, standing up from the table. "We need to find a way to stop the fluctuations before they get worse. I don't care what it takes, this is bigger than any one of us now." The team nodded in agreement, but there was a look in their eyes that told Jaden they all knew the truth, it might already be too late. The following days were a blur of late-night experiments, frantic calculations, and discussions with scientists around the world. The pressure was mounting. Governments had begun to step in, demanding answers. The media storm had only intensified. They had become a worldwide spectacle, the young prodigy and his team, the ones who had cracked the code of zero, only now, they were the ones being blamed for the chaos they had caused. Jaden received a call from a high-ranking government official who had been following the events closely. "We need a solution, Dr. Wells," the official said, his voice clipped and urgent. "The situation is spiraling out of control. We're talking about disruptions in power grids, communication systems, and even localized gravitational anomalies in several regions. We need you and your team to come up with a plan to reverse this, and we need it fast." Jaden felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "We're working on it," he said, his voice tight. "But the problem is more complex than anyone realizes. We can't just undo what we've done with a few adjustments. This is far beyond our original predictions." The official's tone hardened. "Then find a way to stop it. We don't have time for explanations. The public is demanding answers. The world is watching." As Jaden hung up the phone, the enormity of their situation hit him again. The world was looking at him and his team as if they held the key to everything, and yet, they didn't have all the answers. They had no blueprint for what they had just set in motion. The consequences were so much greater than they had ever imagined. That night, Jaden stayed in the lab alone, staring at the data. The energy surges were becoming increasingly erratic. They were no longer just fluctuations in power, they were ripples in the very fabric of space-time. Small anomalies were occurring in distant places, objects displaced in time, strange gravitational forces pulling at buildings, and even inexplicable shifts in the weather. And then, the worst news came. Reports from around the world began to show the first signs of more dangerous phenomena. Strange patterns were appearing in the sky, electromagnetic storms, pulses of light that shouldn't have existed, even distortions in gravity that caused temporary blackouts and localized sinkholes. The anomalies weren't just appearing in urban centers. They were spreading globally, like a web of destruction. Jaden couldn't breathe. Every test, every step they took to reverse the process, seemed to only make the situation worse. The team convened in the lab, all of them exhausted but determined. They had no choice but to act. They had to come up with a solution, or face the consequences of their work spiraling completely out of control. Jaden addressed the team. We need to isolate the 0 point, the source of the fluctuations. If we can stabilize the convergence and reverse the energy flow, maybe we can put a stop to all of this. But I can't do this alone. We need to work together. This is our last chance. Dr. Sinclair stepped forward. But how do we even begin to isolate the convergence? Every time we try to contain it, it just spreads further. We can't predict what will happen next. We need a direct intervention, Jaden said, thinking aloud. Something that's powerful enough to disrupt the fluctuations at their core. We need to create an inverse field, one that can counteract the energy in a controlled way. But we don't have the equipment for that, Dr. Harper protested. This kind of thing, this scale of energy, it's beyond our lab's capabilities. We'll have to make do, Jaden replied, determination hardening his voice. This isn't about perfect science anymore. It's about stopping a catastrophe. The team worked through the night, piecing together whatever resources they had left. They made makeshift adjustments to their energy systems, attempting to create a counterbalance to the energy surges. But with each passing hour, the uncertainty grew. As the first light of dawn crept through the lab windows, Jaden looked around at his team. They were tired, desperate even, but they were still working together. We can do this, Jaden said, more to himself than anyone else. We have to. And then, as the final adjustments were made and the system powered up, Jaden hit the button that would hopefully end the surges. The lab was filled with an eerie silence as they waited, hearts pounding, breath held. The first few moments felt like an eternity. And then, the data on the screens shifted. The fluctuations began to stabilize. Slowly at first, but with increasing momentum. The team held their breath, watching as the energy surges began to calm, the disturbances dying down one by one. We did it, Dr. Sinclair whispered, her voice filled with awe. But as the calm set in, Jaden knew the work wasn't over. There were still consequences to face. The damage they had caused couldn't be erased. The world would forever remember the day they unlocked the power of 0. The aftermath of their success was more profound than Jaden had ever anticipated. When the surges finally stabilized, the world began to breathe a collective sigh of relief. The immediate threat was over, but the damage had already been done. The effects of their experiments, of their discovery, had ripple effects that extended far beyond their lab, far beyond even their own understanding of what was possible. It was a new world now. Scientists, world leaders, and everyday people were all left to grapple with the consequences of what had happened. There was no going back to the way things were before. The world had learned that the laws of physics weren't as unbreakable as they had once believed. A door had been opened, and it would never be shut again. Jaden sat in his office, staring out the window at the city below. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the skyline, but the weight of the world felt heavier than ever. The energy surges had stopped, but the questions remained. What had they unleashed? What was the true potential of Zero, and could humanity truly handle it? His phone buzzed. It was a message from Dr. Harper. We need to talk. It's time to address the world. Jaden stood up, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. There was no escaping it now. He had become a symbol. A symbol of brilliance, yes, but also of the unforeseen dangers of pushing scientific boundaries too far. The press conferences, the endless interviews, the debates, they were all coming, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The world wanted answers, and he had to be the one to give them. The following week was a blur of preparation. Jaden and his team were called upon to address global leaders, fellow scientists, and the media. The world was desperate for an explanation, for some kind of understanding about what had happened and what it meant for the future. In one of the first press conferences, Jaden stood at the podium, the weight of 1,000 eyes on him. His heart pounded in his chest as cameras flashed, and reporters shouted questions at him from every direction. It was almost overwhelming, but he had to stay calm. He had to be the one to guide the conversation. Dr. Wells, do you think the energy surges could happen again? One reporter shouted. Jaden took a deep breath. We've taken every precaution to prevent it from happening again, he said. What we uncovered was unprecedented. But we've learned from our mistakes. We've adjusted our models, and we've created a new framework for safely studying these energy fluctuations. Another reporter asked, are you concerned about the ethical implications of your discovery? Should we be worried about other researchers trying to replicate your work? Jaden nodded, a serious expression crossing his face. We have to be extremely cautious going forward. Science is powerful, but with that power comes great responsibility. My team and I are committed to ensuring that no one else makes the same mistake we did. This discovery, while groundbreaking, has the potential to be both a blessing and a curse. We need to proceed with care. The room fell silent for a moment as his words hung in the air. The questions kept coming, but Jaden answered them as best he could. Despite his nerves, he felt a sense of resolve building within him. This wasn't just about science anymore. It was about understanding how far humanity could go before they lost control. It was about ensuring that the pursuit of knowledge didn't come at too great a cost. As the days turned into weeks, Jaden and his team worked tirelessly to develop new protocols, new safety measures, and a deeper understanding of the forces they had unlocked. They weren't just studying energy anymore, they were studying the very nature of reality itself. Zero was no longer a mere mathematical concept. It had become a tangible force, one that could alter the way the universe operated. The implications were far-reaching. But even as they worked to understand the full scope of their discovery, Jaden found himself questioning everything. Was it worth it? Was the risk of discovery truly worth the potential harm? They had created something extraordinary, but they had also unlocked a Pandora's box of unknowns. And then there was the question of his future. What did it mean for a young man like him, someone who had once been laughed at in a classroom, dismissed as just another kid with a dream? What did it mean now that the world had seen what he could do? Jaden thought back to the day when his math teacher had mocked his solution. You'll never amount to anything in the world of science, she had said. Now, years later, Jaden had proven her wrong in the most incredible way possible. But proving her wrong didn't make everything feel better. It didn't erase the fear, the responsibility, or the uncertainty. What came next was the hardest part, living with the legacy of his discovery. One evening, Jaden met with his team in the lab to discuss their next steps. They had come a long way since their first chaotic experiments, but now they needed to shift their focus to long-term solutions. They couldn't keep working in the shadows of fear and uncertainty forever. It was time to step into the light and work with the world, collaborate with other experts, other nations, to harness the power of zero for the good of humanity. We've created something extraordinary, Dr. Harper said, looking at the team. But now, we have to figure out how to control it. If we're going to use zero to better the world, we need to build a framework for responsible use. Jaden nodded. I agree. It's not about suppressing knowledge. It's about ensuring that it's used responsibly. We can't just lock this away. The world deserves to understand what we've discovered, but we need to be the ones to guide that understanding. We're not just scientists anymore. We're stewards of something far bigger. The team spent the next several months working on their plans. They were still figuring out the finer details of their work, but one thing was certain: they were committed to ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. They wanted to unlock the potential of zero, but they also wanted to make sure it would never again come at such a cost. Months later, as Jaden stood on stage at a global scientific summit, presenting their findings to an audience of experts from around the world, he couldn't help but reflect on everything that had brought him to this moment. From the days when he was laughed at by his teacher, to the moment when a world-renowned scientist had confirmed his discovery, to now, standing before the most brilliant minds in the world, explaining the potential and dangers of his work. His voice was steady as he spoke. We have discovered something that changes everything. The force we've uncovered, the energy fluctuations, have the potential to revolutionize everything from energy production to space exploration. But with that power comes a responsibility that we must all take seriously. We cannot afford to let this discovery be misused. We must approach it with caution, collaboration, and foresight. As the applause filled the room, Jaden felt a sense of peace settle within him. The journey had been long, and there would be more challenges ahead. But he had come full circle, from a student laughed at by his teacher to a scientist standing at the forefront of a new era of discovery. The legacy of zero would be written not just in the equations and theories, but in the choices they made. And Jaden knew that, as long as they acted with integrity, they could make sure that their discovery was used for the betterment of humanity. The teacher had laughed at him once, but now, the world was listening. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?